On the day Maria and I went ring shopping for our wedding, her long-lost flame suddenly returned to the country. At the airport, she introduced me to him. My friend, Eric. Maria didn't call me her boyfriend or anything, even wanted to call off the engagement party. I thought she'd expect me to beg her to marry me, but it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Remember your friend who wanted to hook up with me last time? Honestly, I was down for that. Leo came back the day Maria and I were picking out rings. The timing was her idea. Last week, on Leo's birthday, she got wasted. She stumbled home and mistook me for Leo, hugging my neck and calling me by his name. Over and over, she asked why he'd been gone all these years and never reached out. This wasn't a one-time thing. Each time, she'd never bring it up afterward, and neither did I. But this time, I recorded it. Some things just need to be addressed. The next day, I showed Maria the video, and she glanced at the phone but didn't reach for it, just sipped her milk calmly. I thought you were used to it by now, she said nonchalantly. I turned off the phone, giving a bitter smile. I've been with you for 5 years, and you still can't forget him. You're clearly miserable without him. I've made up my mind. I'm letting go. Go find him. With that, I didn't wait for her reply and headed out for work. We didn't speak for 3 days. I crashed at my buddy's place, didn't go home. To my surprise, Maria didn't leave. Instead, she came looking for me. She said she wanted to marry me and already picked a date for ring shopping. Maria's always like that, hitting me with a hard truth, then sweetening it with something nice. Each time we'd argue about Leo, she'd make breakfast or plan a candlelight dinner, waiting for me after work. She'd take my hand and sweet-talk me, saying she's grown used to me, and someday she'll fall in love with me. That kind of sweet talk always got me, made me forget all the old grudges, believing she'd eventually come around. I was way too giving. She knew how to play me. For 5 years, she patched things up with that same trick. I was like a kite in her hands, the string under her control. They say love at its peak turns into something hurtful. My loss was inevitable. Now, watching her excitedly talk about marrying me, I didn't feel the usual joy. Over the years, I'd planned several proposals, but she always turned them down for one reason or another. Now I was ready to let go, and suddenly she wanted to tie the knot. Looking at her, I calmly asked, Maria, do you really want to get married? She came closer, linking her arm with mine, and sincerely said, Eric, I've thought a lot these past 3 days. I'm just so used to you. I can't live without you. This kind of confession, I'd imagined countless times in the past 5 years. But finally hearing it, my heart didn't swell. I still went with Maria to the ring store. Just as we entered, her phone rang. The moment she saw the caller ID, her whole body tensed, stopping dead in her tracks. I glanced over and saw her nervously turn off the screen, then look at me. Her guilt was written all over her face. I didn't need to guess who it was. She'd been waiting for this call for 5 years. The usually composed her, now completely thrown off. Go on, answer it, I said with crossed arms, smiling at her. She bit her lip and ended the call. Just a spam call, nothing worth picking up. Let's pick out the ring. I didn't bother with assumptions. I realized I didn't even feel like questioning it anymore. The store clerk showed us the top 3 bestsellers, going through the sales pitch. I think they all look good. Maria, which one do you like? I asked her, my eyes on the display. But she was out of it, eyes downcast, fingers tapping away at her phone. Seemed like she was texting someone. Thanks to her clumsy attempts to cover the screen, I saw it was Leo. Maria? I called out again, snapping her out of it. Okay, we'll take the one you picked. Her smile was forced. I noticed everything, took it all in. I didn't decide. I'm asking which one you like. Maria froze, her typing halted. Suddenly, she made a big decision of sorts. Leo's back. He's at the airport now. Can you come with me to pick him up? She finally said what she needed to. I looked at her, not angry, not hurt, no sadness. Just a weird sense of satisfaction for guessing right. Sure, let's go. Even as I spoke, I confirmed, I wasn't feeling any sadness. I went with her to the airport. Being with Maria all these years, the shadow of Leo was always a suffocating presence. like sharp claws around my heart, squeezing my throat. But now, watching Leo approach with his luggage, I felt nothing. Maria, however, was a bundle of nerves, fussing over her outfit. Finally, unable to restrain herself, she asked me, "Do I look okay in this today?" "Relax, you look great." After all these years, I'd never seen her care this much about her appearance around me. Back in the day, I had to beg her for ages before she'd agree to hang out with my friends. Every time, she'd just grab some random jacket from the closet and head out. During the gathering, she'd have this gloomy look on her face the whole time. When I talked to her, her eyes were full of impatience and disdain. If friends asked about our relationship, she'd just say we were friends. I never publicly acknowledged my relationship with her. Makes sense, though. Being seen as a total simp probably isn't all that respectable, huh? No wonder Maria never even looked my way. Leo walked over to us, dragging his suitcase. He gave Maria a hug first and only then noticed me. He sized me up before asking Maria, "Maria, who's this handsome guy?" Maria glanced at me, a bit sheepish, then replied, "My friend, Eric." She said friend, not boyfriend. For a moment, it felt like my heart skipped a painful beat. But then that sharp pain passed just as quickly. It was like I suddenly let go. Playing along, I extended my hand toward Leo. "Maria's talked about you a lot over these 5 years. Welcome back." Maria's face went from guilty to shocked after I said that. She gave me this suspicious look, her eyes showing all sorts of emotions. Honestly, I found it amusing. Was she shocked that I didn't spill the beans, that I didn't immediately declare I was her boyfriend to Leo? Shouldn't she be relieved I went along with her lie? She's denied me as her boyfriend plenty of times before, like when her college friends came to town and we hosted them. She introduced me as just a friend then, too. That night, we had our first argument. I questioned if she thought being my girlfriend was something embarrassing. In the face of my frustration and borderline hysteria, she just gave a cold chuckle and didn't even bother responding. Her snooty expression, like she was looking at a clown throwing a tantrum. Looking back, I was just being petty back then. It was just a label. Whether she acknowledges it or not, it really isn't that important. Leo gave my shoulder a pat. "Thanks for looking after Maria these past 5 years." Before I could reply, Maria cut in, "Okay, you two have just met, don't get all sappy." I chuckled to myself. Maria still doesn't get me. She was worried I'd spill too much to Leo and reveal our relationship. But she seemed to forget. I'm not one to beat around the bush. Leo affectionately tweaked her nose. "After a whole day on the plane, I'm starving. Let's grab some food." Leo changed the subject deliberately, and Maria beamed, "What's on your mind?" "Hot pot." So, the three of us headed to the parking lot. This time, I didn't rush to open the passenger door for Maria, and she naturally sat in the back with Leo. She chatted with him nonstop, asking about his time abroad and letting out bursts of laughter. In my memory, Maria was never this animated. Maybe the Maria with Leo is the real her. Thinking about the past, spending 5 years trying to make it work, and not receiving much in return from Maria. She couldn't even be herself with me. That's pretty much a failure, I suppose. I think it's time for me to wake up. Leo and Maria were chatting away like I wasn't even there. But that's fine. Without being in their conversation, there's no awkwardness. I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror. I had a faint smile like none of this mattered. Following Maria's directions, I drove us to a small hot pot place. It was tucked away, in a winding alley full of homes. Clothes hung out to dry in the winter air were stiff. The scent of barbecue and skewers was kind of a turn-off. I never thought I'd see Maria in a place like this. She and Leo walked side by side, her eyes glued to him. The sound of crunching snow filled the air, and my steps slowed. Maria didn't notice. I watched their backs. Maria was in a white puffer jacket, matching perfectly with Leo. She even helped steady him as he slipped on the steps. The hot pot place was bustling, mostly with local college students. I followed them in. "Ah, it's you guys. It's been years. You two must be married by now?" The owner greeted happily. The owner's words hung in the air as I stepped in. Turns out Maria and Leo used to come here a lot in their college days. They were reliving old memories. Faced with the owner's question, they just smiled at each other and didn't correct them. I thought Maria probably wished Leo was her husband right now. Even after 5 years of me treating her well, she never forgot about him. The aroma of the beef hot pot filled the air as Maria picked a corner booth. The inside was clean compared to the chaotic outside. They were enjoying themselves, their noses turning red from the spice. But I didn't have much of an appetite. Maria added some food to Leo's bowl and then remembered to add a couple of beef pieces to mine too. As steam rose, I set down my chopsticks. I don't eat spicy, I said, looking at Maria. My voice carried an unexpected sharpness, making the place go quiet for a moment. Maria then remembered my preferences. Sorry, I just thought of how much Leo loves this place and forgot you can't handle spicy food. She seemed anxious, her eyes fixed on me. She thought I was about to lose it. I could see the worry in her eyes. It seemed she really didn't want Leo to know about the real score between us. But seeing her uneasy expression, the way her long lashes fluttered, at that moment it wasn't sadness I felt, or anger at her for not owning up to our relationship. Just a calmness, as if something drained my emotions. From the moment Leo showed up, Maria made her choice. I stopped hoping she'd love me back. I didn't want to stick around. Standing, I addressed the two of them calmly. It's been a long 5 years. You guys catch up tonight. Oh, I just remembered an urgent file I need to handle. I gotta head out. So with that, I pulled back my chair and walked out of the hot pot place. From behind me, I heard Leo ask Maria with confusion, "Your friend doesn't like you. Does he? Is he jealous 'cause I showed up?" Maria paused, then laughed. "No way. We're like sisters, just pure friendship. Besides, I'll only ever love you. Don't you know?" I heard it loud and clear. The strange thing was, I didn't even feel the slightest bit of disappointment. Right then, I realized my feelings for Maria had vanished. Leo was Maria's true love. I've always known that. She loved him so much it hurt when he left the country without a word. And I loved her deeply, too. Even when I knew she agreed to be my girlfriend just out of spite, I still said yes. First, Maria was cold to me. Even though she came home every day, she never spoke a word. I never blamed her for it. I chose this path myself. I believed that if I persisted, I could melt her icy heart. But after 5 years, it was just a joke. In the end, the only one moved was myself. Maria got home around midnight. When she came in, I was still reading in the study. She didn't call out to me, just went straight to the bedroom. Hearing her, I went to take a look. She was putting her suitcase on the floor, packing her clothes. Seeing me, she stopped and straightened up. Facing me, she said outright, "I think I should move out?" For a moment, the room was painfully quiet. I studied Maria's subtle expressions. There was guilt in her eyes, but it was faint. With the conversation this far, I pressed my lips together and asked directly, "You want to break up, right?" After all this back and forth, I'm more exhausted than anyone and more eager to let go. I thought Maria would wait until at least tomorrow to have this talk. But unexpectedly, she couldn't wait even for tonight to cut ties. She tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Eric, wasting time on me seems unfair to you. Maybe you should look at other women." I took a deep breath, smiling broadly. "Exactly. Last time your friend seemed interested in me, and honestly I liked the idea too." In the dim lighting, maybe it was my imagination, but Maria's expression darkened for a minute. Then she laughed. "Eric, are you just being spiteful?" I crouched, pulling her already packed suitcase together, and replied calmly, "You're overthinking it. After meeting her a few times, I think she's quite nice." Maria frowned. "Eric, are you sure you're not just trying to get back at me? You said it yourself, I should look at other women. Now that Leo's back, I'm giving you back to him. I should move forward too, right?" Maria didn't respond, just stared deeply at me. I saw a brief glimmer of loss in her eyes. Then she said, word by word, "Since you like her, I'll set up a meeting soon, personally introduce you." With that, she grabbed her suitcase and headed out. Next, I heard the front door slam shut outside. With me, she didn't see me pleading during our breakup, and even heard about me liking her friend. She was mad. Maria stopped talking to me again. In the past, whenever she ignored me, I'd feel down, racking my brain for ways to make up quickly. But these days, I don't think about Maria first, and strangely, it feels like a load's been lifted. I've thrown myself completely into my work. Without distractions, my work efficiency has skyrocketed, earning me praise from my boss for 2 consecutive days. Maria called again a week later. She had set up a dinner to officially introduce me to her friend. I gladly accepted. When I got there, she and Leo were already waiting. As I approached, I immediately saw their interlocked fingers. Leo glanced at me and lifted Maria's hand as if to assert something. Maria and I are together now. I raised an eyebrow and smiled slightly, having already anticipated this. Maria smiled too. Eric, you'll wish us well, right? I knew Maria was trying to provoke me, but I felt nothing. Of course, congratulations, you two becoming a couple. Maria led me to meet her friend, Stella. Stella looked at me and said softly, "Hi Eric, I'm Stella." It suddenly reminded me of that time at the bar when she drunkenly wrapped her arms around my neck asking if I wanted to sleep with her. Looking at her now, all gentle and charming, I couldn't help but wonder if that was really her back then. Caught in my thoughts, I stayed silent for a moment. Without my response, she fluttered her long eyelashes, looking a bit embarrassed, then flashed a small smile. I asked Maria to arrange this. "Please don't be mad." I shook off my memories and smiled slightly. "So this dinner means you want to pursue me?" Stella's face turned beet red. "Do you not remember me? I actually met you before Maria, and I've liked you ever since. But all these years, it seemed like your heart was only with Maria." Hearing Stella's confession, Maria coughed twice. "Stella, what nonsense are you spouting?" Stella suddenly remembered Leo beside her and quickly explained. "Leo, it's just my thoughts. Maria and Eric are really just friends." Leo smiled and affectionately ruffled Maria's head. "I won't overthink it. Since college, I knew my dear could never love anyone else but me." I didn't interject, just stood there quietly. At that moment, I realized how much of a failure I was. I had lived with Maria as a couple for 5 years, yet in the end, our relationship was a mystery to even her best friend. Seeing me zone out, Stella waved her hand in front of my face. "Eric, don't feel awkward. If you're not into it, it's cool. We can just be friends, right?" Maria looked over at us, sipped on her juice that the waiter had just brought over. I chuckled, "Nah, I'm not awkward. You're cool." Stella, after what seemed like a moment of gathering courage, said, "It might be weird for a girl to say this first, but if you think I'm okay, can I have a chance? Maybe be your girlfriend?" I noticed Maria put down her juice, absent-mindedly tapping her fingers on the glass. Stella's gaze was intense, almost felt like it was burning my skin. I gave a little smile, making sure there was no bitterness or revenge in my heart, then calmly said, "Let's give it a shot." The tapping on the glass paused for a second. Stella was taken aback. "Give it a shot? How?" Then she quickly caught on, blushing as she said, "Okay, all right." I added, "I don't really have much dating experience, so let's just start as friends." Maria took another sip of her juice, chuckled, "Yeah, he's got no experience. Just a casual remark, considering I spent 5 years trying hard to win her over." After dinner, it was a given that I'd take Stella home. Maria watched as she got into the passenger seat next to me. As I opened the door, Leo and Stella saw the Eric's lover seat sticker on the passenger side. Last time it was pretty dark, and Leo was in the back, so he didn't notice it. Eric's lover seat. "Huh, bro? Smooth move, kinda romantic. But you might want to change it to Stella's seat." Stella blushed even more hearing that. I remembered when I bought that sticker, trying to surprise Maria. I thought she'd be happy to see it, but she found it childish at the time. I got upset, and to make up for it, she even posted something on her social media. It read, "Eric said, 'This is my seat.'" Man, that got to me. 3 months later, I accidentally found out on her post settings that it was viewable to me only. Turned out I'd been a joke since then. I peeled the sticker off, saying, "Lost a bet playing truth or dare with friends. Forgot to take it off." A fib, but who cares, Maria didn't mind anymore. I gently closed the door for Stella. Maria, pulling a smile, joked, "Stella, Eric is super insecure. Now you've sat in his passenger seat. Don't sit in any other guy's." Knowing Maria well, I didn't take it as sarcasm. It was just then I realized she might feel a bit guilty. She wasn't completely blind to my pain over our 5-year relationship. But she had her sights set on Leo, leaving her with little choice from the start. As the car started, Maria clung to Leo as they stepped back a few paces, then gave me a look. Driving off, I saw her still looking my way from the rearview mirror, watching us leave. A week into knowing Stella, she began hitting me up more often. "Eric, a new movie just came out. It's really good. Wanna see it? Eric, what's your favorite food?" My office handed out a ton of tea. I don't really drink tea. Wanna have some? I've always loved tea, something Maria knew too well. Seeing Stella's text made me pause. Replied, "Does your office give out tea every year?" Stella replied instantly, "Yep, I save it all up. Don't like it, but it's quality tea. Want it all in the future?" Stella and Maria worked at the same company, so they get tea every year. Maria knew I loved tea but never brought me any. Not once in 5 years. Thinking back, I did so much but got nothing in return. I didn't reply to Stella, but she showed up after work. When I saw her, she nervously said, "I'm not trying to ambush you. You didn't text back, so I brought the tea anyway." Seeing her flustered made me laugh. Having such a cute girlfriend could be fun, I thought. Stella gave me the tea, so I asked her to the movies the next day. It was a film I had been wanting to see for a while. I love watching movies in the theater. Had asked Maria many times before, but she'd always put it off. Going alone seemed pointless, so I lost interest eventually. But when scrolling through my phone yesterday, I found out it's screening again. The theater wasn't crowded since it was an old movie, and the space around us was nice and empty. During the end, I heard a soft laugh. It sounded familiar. I turned and recognized a face from the front row. Without a second look, I knew it was Maria and Leo. Guess Maria didn't dislike movies, just watching them with me. But seeing her now didn't stir much in me. Just calm, with none of that old tension. The movie was over and Stella and I walked out side by side. That's when we bumped into them. "Stella?" Maria exclaimed, and then her eyes landed on me, changing her expression a bit. Stella smiled and nodded. "Maria, you guys here for a movie too?" Maria tightly held Leo's hand. "Leo said this movie is good, so I'm here with him," she said with a smile on her face, one that I hadn't seen in our 5 years together. Maybe it's because she'd found true love. Her usually cold eyes now had a gentle sparkle, and even the slight curve at the corners of her eyes seemed bigger than before. I could see her love for Leo and realized how foolish I'd been for the past 5 years. I greeted them briefly and told Stella, "Let's go." Stella quickly said goodbye to Maria and followed me out of the theater. We passed a bubble tea shop, and after Stella looked at it twice, I went in and got us 2 cups. I picked out a milk tea for her and handed it over. It was still warm. The theater was freezing. "Your hands must be ice cold. Do you like this flavor?" I asked. Stella held the milk tea, smiling and nodding. "I do," she said. Then my phone buzzed. I saw it was Maria's message. Since Leo came back from abroad, she hadn't messaged me until now. "Had fun watching the movie with Stella?" she texted. What did she mean by that? Was she sincerely checking in on me? Or was it some kind of sarcastic jab? I didn't reply. Soon she sent another message. The text was sharp. "You and Stella are pretty tight. Have you guys done it yet? What position?" I stared at the screen, thought for a few seconds, then typed and sent a reply. "What position? Want me to send you a video?" As if she'd care. 5 years, and I never thought you'd even notice, Stella. Her reply came after a long pause. I didn't want to see any more messages, so I turned off my phone and continued the walk, chatting with Stella along the way. We got to her building and I said goodbye. I was about to leave when Stella suddenly called out, "Eric." Looking back, I saw her fidgeting with her fingers in the dim light, hesitating before speaking softly. "Next time we meet, can I hold your hand?" she asked. I smiled and nodded. "Sure." Stella, looking electrified, took a couple of steps, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed me. It was a shy kiss, fitting her personality. Then, she nervously said, "Get some rest, see you tomorrow," avoiding my gaze and running off with a flushed face. Something stirred in my chest, leaving me a bit dazed. The next day was Saturday, and I slept in. I used to wake up early on weekends to get fresh groceries at the market and line up for Maria's favorite tofu pudding. Was as diligent as a dad. Without that routine, I felt more relaxed. Still, my body clock woke me up before too long. As soon as I picked up my phone, there was another message from Maria. "Today I want Kung Pao chicken and braised eggplant." But then she unsent it, must have meant to send it to Leo, right? Didn't want him to know we talked, and definitely didn't mean for me to see it. I ignored it and got up to start my day. Not long after, Stella messaged, inviting me to the walking street. She seemed really eager, so I agreed. We met up that evening on the walking street, home to little stores and great lighting for strolls. It was along the river, and locals often went there for evening walks. Stella clung tightly to something as she greeted me. "I brewed this green tea at home, kept it warm just for you. Here, try it." It was the first time someone thought of me like this, and it felt warm inside. I took the cup, opened it, and had a sip. The fragrance filled my mouth. "How is it? Did I brew it right?" Stella asked eagerly. "It's great," I nodded seriously. She visibly relaxed, like she'd shed a heavy burden, and led me for a walk by the river. Stella wasn't very talkative, but we maintained a comfortable silence that I appreciated. Seeing her effort to find things to chat about was kinda cute, even when we lapsed into silence. I couldn't help but remember my time with Maria, where I had to tread carefully with every word and move. Thinking back now, all those years spent trying to please her felt like such a waste. Suddenly, boom! The sky lit up with colorful fireworks. They were shooting off across the river, and we had the best spot to watch. As we watched, I felt the emotion rising within me amidst the fireworks. When they ended, Stella cheerfully said, "I saw online there'd be a fireworks show tonight, so that's why I wanted you to come. In our hometown, we have a saying that two people who watch fireworks together will be blessed to be together forever," she added. I remembered telling Maria something similar once. She'd dismissed it as silly. Smiling at Stella, her eyes sparkled in the night, so sincere and beautiful. She gazed back at me, her eyes filled with joy and hope. "Stella, thank you," I said. She got nervous again, shifted around, and asked, "Eric, are we like boyfriend and girlfriend now?" Then she quickly, anxiously added, "I promise to like only you, forever." She almost laid her heart bare for me. Her sincerity outshone pure gold. I felt a warmth in my eyes. Meeting Maria had been unfortunate for me. But meeting Stella? That was a stroke of luck. I chuckled and pulled her into my arms. "Stella," I asked curiously, "why do you even like me?" Turns out Stella knew me for quite some time. One day in middle school, it rained heavily. I saw a girl getting soaked at the bus stop. When my bus arrived, I handed her my umbrella. From that moment, Stella had a crush on me. Later, she saw me again. I didn't remember her. That's why, when she got drunk at the bar, she clung to me, insisting we sleep together. Turns out, she'd been in love with me for years. I know too well the feeling of loving someone and not being able to have them. At this moment, I felt a pang for the silly woman in front of me. Though Stella was Maria's best friend, she never knew Maria and I were a thing. To her, I was just someone hopelessly chasing Maria. For 5 years, she only saw the most pathetic side of me. She wanted to forget about me, but one day after work, she saw me again. I was outside in the cold, holding a thermos, waiting for Maria. It was freezing. I was stomping my feet, cheeks all red from the cold. Yet I waited there with a hopeful smile. That sight became etched in her heart. She said, "If you are so devoted to Maria, it means you are a good person." She confirmed multiple times with Maria that I was just a friend to her. Stella believed that one day I would see her. Lucky for her, I finally did. After laying it all out, my relationship with Stella became more natural. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized her virtues. Honesty, sincerity, attention to detail. She never lost her cool, always gave me her full attention, and seriously discussed any disagreements. Being with her made me truly happy. In 2 months, we got really close. She started becoming a big part of my life. She'd ask about dinner plans, drop by after work to go grocery shopping with me. I'd do the washing and cutting, and she'd handle the cooking. Once, she asked for a spare key just for convenience. Without thinking, I gave it to her. When she took the key from my hand, we both froze. In a raspy voice, she joked, "Should I move in?" I told her she couldn't. She laughed, "Just kidding." And then her eyes got serious. "What if I move next door?" I didn't respond, but a few days later, she actually moved next door, into the vacant apartment. She came over late one night, asking to borrow the shower since her gas was not set up. After her shower, there she stood, toweling her hair, saying her place was too messy for her to sleep in, so maybe using my couch wouldn't be a bad idea. She promised she wouldn't do anything. That made me laugh. Shouldn't she worry about me taking advantage? I let her use my bed instead. The next morning, she was up early, making breakfast in the kitchen, apron on and all. It was a scene that I longed to have for the last 5 years. As if possessed, I snapped a photo of her back. At the office the next day, I couldn't help but smile at the photo. My coworker teased that I must be in love since I've been so upbeat lately. Really? But honestly, I hadn't thought of Maria for a while. Living close to Stella, I'd drive to pick her up after work. One day she called ahead, saying I didn't need to. Turns out Maria and Leo had a fight. Leo went MIA for 3 days, Maria was a mess, and Stella was going to stay with her for a bit. As she spoke of Maria, I realized it didn't hurt to hear her name. Instead, a twisted sense of revenge stirred in me. Narrow-minded as it was, I hoped Maria felt what it was like for sincere feelings to be wasted. Stella returned home after 3 days. She told me Maria was doing much better. I ruffled her hair and said, "Fool. I wasn't worried about her. I just missed your cooking." I smoothly changed the subject, and her attention shifted as she dragged me to the supermarket for groceries. I noticed I didn't care about Maria anymore. Even knowing she wasn't doing well, it didn't occupy my thoughts. Over dinner one night, Stella shyly asked if I'd spend her birthday with her. I looked at the calendar to remember her birthday, realizing it fell on the same day as Maria's mother's anniversary. Every year, I'd spend that day with Maria, taking a day off to prepare meals and spend the day with her, never going out. I'd put everything aside to be with her. Talk, watch movies, water the balcony plants, then cook dinner, tuck her in under a blanket, and watch as she drifted to sleep. Other than Maria and I, no one else remembered her mother's death anniversary. Not even Stella knew. The pain of her mother's suicide wasn't obvious to others, who just saw gossip about her possibly leaving her family for someone in the States. So Maria went on working as if nothing was wrong. But I knew the sadness seeped from her every movement and smile. Looking at the red mark on the calendar, I quietly erased it. Today I took the day off like usual and spent it at the amusement park with Stella. Around noon, we went to try the restaurant she's been talking about for ages. Later, I got a call from Maria. Sounding a bit worn out, she asked why I didn't show up. I said Stella wanted me to be there with her. There was sudden silence on the other end of the line. After a while, Maria asked slowly, "Do you even know what today is?" I replied, "I know, but today is Stella's birthday. You should have asked Leo to be with you." Maria let out a bitter laugh. I told him about today a week ago, but he still went off to play mountain biking with his friends first thing. He's not like you. He doesn't care about how I feel. I sighed softly. 2 people being together takes some getting used to. Realizing that might sound too cold, I took a deep breath and tried to comfort her with a gentler tone. "Are you all right? If you're feeling down, take a walk or call a friend to keep you company." After a while, she faintly responded, "Yeah," and the call ended. She had made her final decision, and I was starting a new chapter. After all, I couldn't be there for her forever, I thought. The next morning, I saw that Maria had called me twice, once at midnight and once at 2 a.m. By then, I had set my phone to silent and was fast asleep. Looking at those missed calls, I remembered how I couldn't sleep for nights on end whenever Maria and I had a tiff. My heart felt like a twisted, dried-up rag, all sour and bitter, until I couldn't take it anymore and would be the one to make peace with her. I couldn't bring myself to call her back then. I carefully choose my words and text her. Every sentence, every word carried helplessness and humility. So later on, no matter the reason for our arguments, Maria got used to me always backing down first. She'd then graciously nod, and we'd patch things up as if nothing happened. But last night, I spent so much time with Stella that by the time she went home, I just washed my face and crashed. If it weren't for seeing Maria's calls in the morning, I wouldn't even have thought of her today. I gave it a thought and decided to message her back. Fell asleep last night. What's up? After sending, I got up, freshened up, and when I picked up my phone again, I saw she replied faster than I expected. But it was just 3 words. Nothing much. After that, Maria and I didn't contact each other for a week. But sometimes I heard from Stella that she and Leo seemed to be arguing a lot. Stella said Leo is way too selfish and has a really extreme personality. She wondered what Maria saw in him. But wasn't that my question too? For 5 years, I practically wore my heart on my sleeve for Maria. Yet in the end, she never appreciated it. She still couldn't forget Leo. Listening to Maria's stories now, I realized I felt no sadness at all. I was so indifferent. It was puzzling, even to me. Over dinner, Stella asked, "Eric, we're having a company party tonight, and everyone's inviting their partners. Do you want to come?" If the party's at her workplace, Maria would be there too. Stella was clearly excited, wanting me to go. By now, we practically considered each other boyfriend and girlfriend. But then I thought, since everyone's bringing a partner, Maria was sure to bring Leo. If she wasn't worried about awkwardness, why should I be? I agreed, and Stella beamed like a child. Not wanting to embarrass Stella, I went early, got a haircut, and even wore a suit to make sure I was on time. When I arrived at the hotel, Stella was already waiting outside. Seeing me, she looked all thrilled and goofy. "Eric, you look so handsome tonight. Dressed up like that, other girls won't be able to take their eyes off you, and I'll get jealous." I gave her a playful glare and went inside with her. Before entering the private room, I took her hand to show support, worried someone might tease her. And just like that, we walked in. "Whoa, Stella, you can keep a secret. You've been hiding such an amazing boyfriend from us?" Everyone in the room started cheering, and Stella blushed a deeper shade and squeezed my hand tighter. "This is my boyfriend, Eric," she introduced. I couldn't help but glance at Maria. I realized it had been a month since I last saw her. She didn't hide the surprise in her eyes, looking straight at me and Stella, then at our joined hands. Strangely, Leo wasn't with her. We sat across from Maria, trying not to meet her gaze. I pretended not to notice it at all. Someone asked Stella, "Stella, how did you meet your boyfriend?" Stella simply answered, "I have to thank Maria for that. She set us up." "Wow, Maria, you know this cutie pie and didn't want him for yourself? You gave him to Stella? She's got someone else, remember? 2 weeks ago, wasn't he picking her up from work every day? And he's good looking too." Her colleagues chattered away, and someone asked Maria why she didn't bring her boyfriend. Maria downed her drink and said bluntly, "We broke up. He's never home, always off playing motocross with his buddies. Even when he's around, he's just gaming nonstop. What's the point of being handsome if he doesn't care? I'd only end up with more wrinkles. Sooner split, the better." My hand paused a second. Did it really end that way with Leo? Stella reached for shrimp on the platter, and I, seeing her struggle, scooped some for her. "I'll peel this for you." I placed the peeled shrimp in her bowl, smiling, "Eat up." Stella's eyes sparkled, and she handed me a napkin. "Thank you, Eric." I served her more soup and put food on her plate. My co-workers started teasing us, saying dinner was just an excuse to watch us be all cutesy. But across from me, Maria sat silent, just picking at her food. Weirdly, that gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. I had a great time at dinner. I met some of Stella's co-workers. They were warm and wished us well, saying they'd give her a big red envelope when she gets married. After dinner, everyone went their separate ways. Since I'd had some drinks, I didn't drive. Stella called a car. While waiting, I spotted Maria standing aside, looking a bit pale and keeping to herself. Stella called out, "Maria, we're heading in the same direction. Want to join us?" I thought Maria would say no, but she just quietly joined us. When the taxi arrived, I took the front seat. Stella and Maria sat in the back. Stella suddenly asked, "Maria, you broke up and didn't tell me?" Maria replied flatly, "I just realized it wasn't right for me. Nothing worth mentioning." Hearing that, I couldn't help but glance at her through the rearview mirror. Our eyes met, but there was so much in hers I couldn't decipher. Stella noticed, "Maria, you don't look well. Are you feeling sick?" I turned back. Maria did look pale, with her brows furrowed and head down, not speaking. After a moment, I asked, "Is it your stomach? You should take some medicine when you get home." Maria gave me a long look. I snapped back and turned away, ignoring her. I hadn't thought about her for a long time. Yet now her gaze felt like it was piercing through me, making me uneasy. Still, I didn't turn back. I felt a bit irritated, thinking about how she left me for Leo, and now she's here, vulnerable, like I owe her something. All of this is on her. We soon dropped Maria off near her place. She left without a word. When Stella and I got home, we walked through the apartment complex together. This time, I reached out and held her hand. She sighed with relief. "I thought you'd be upset about Maria's breakup. Eric, you must have really liked Maria before." "Huh?" Looking at Stella made me want to tell her that Maria and I used to date. But then I thought, it's all in the past, bringing it up now wouldn't make sense. I gently rubbed her head. "Silly. The one I like now is you." Stella lowered her head, smiling shyly. We took a stroll together, then headed our separate ways. Once home, I got a call from Maria. Her first words were, "You actually slept with Stella, right?" Oddly, I felt calm. "Isn't that pretty normal?" Maria was silent before saying, "Eric, I'm sorry. I regret it. I don't love Leo. I've been thinking of you, about our 5 years together. I really regret introducing Stella to you. I was worried you'd ruin things with Leo, so I stupidly set you up with Stella. I know you don't like her. Don't let my mistake cost you your happiness. You don't have to be with Stella." I told her, "Being with Stella is my choice because I like her, not because of anything to do with you, Maria." She hesitated. "I don't believe you." Then I reminded her, "When you moved, I left some medicine in your suitcase. Take it if you need it. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up." "Wait." Maria stopped me from ending the call, saying, "Eric, let's get back together. I don't care if you've been with Stella." At that moment, I truly pitied Maria. I cut her off, "But I do care that you lived with Leo." Then I hung up. Maria called again. I didn't answer right away. On her 23rd call, I finally picked up. I snapped, "Maria, just because I'm not angry doesn't mean I won't get angry. Stop testing my limits." She suddenly chuckled, "Eric, I know you. You couldn't really love anyone else but me. We'll see what happens." Imagine Stella's reaction if she found out we lived together for 5 years. "Maria, what do you want?" She laughed again. "Don't worry. I won't spill the beans just yet. I just hope you face your true feelings." The call ended abruptly. I held the phone tightly, then laughed at myself once I calmed down. There was a time when Maria was everything to me. I centered my whole life around her, making sure she was taken care of. But when I let go, it was her who couldn't bear it. After the party, everyone knew Stella and I were a couple. It spread and lots of friends found out. My best bud Jason, the only one who knew about me and Maria, rushed over when he heard about my new girlfriend being Maria's best friend. "Eric, don't be stupid. Stella was introduced by Maria, right? They're probably in on something together. Haven't you learned from the 5 years you spent with Maria? You want to start fresh. There are plenty of women out there. Why pick Maria's friend? Birds of a feather, man. Be cautious or you'll end up being laughed at. I know Maria too well. She's bad news, and her friend can't be much better." I patted him to calm him down. "You haven't met Stella. She's different from Maria. She doesn't even know about my past with Maria. I mean, we're just dating, not getting married right away, so stop worrying too much." "Okay." Jason sighed helplessly. "You're destined to fall for Maria in this lifetime. I heard she just broke up with her crush." She'll probably come back for you. Now that you're with her friend, make sure to hold your ground. Don't let her sweet talk you again." I rolled my eyes. "You really think I have no backbone?" Jason shrugged. "It's just that, in the past 5 years, I've seen you do a lot of things that were spineless." I can't really blame him for thinking that way. For the past 5 years, Jason's been the only witness to my relationship with Maria. He once said I was like Maria's shadow, appearing when summoned and disappearing when dismissed. He was harsh, saying I wasn't even a true backup, just a boyfriend in name that no one knew about. I was only a pastime for Maria's single periods. I thought to myself that this time, I should finally be able to move on from Maria. But I forgot, from ages 15 to 30, I was too entangled with her. Maria does seem to be leaning on me again, calling in the middle of the night. Once I answered, she'd be crying on the other end. Feeling frustrated, I coldly said, "Maria, I've started a new life. You should be reaching out to Leo to clear things up, not calling me late at night to cry. If you keep this up, I'll block you." Maria's sobs stopped abruptly. After a while, she said between sniffs, "You can't be that heartless. Don't you remember the hardest times of your youth when I saved you? Eric, you haven't forgotten, right?" That one sentence from Maria took me right back to being 16. I slumped down, defeated. If in these past 2 months I'd almost forgotten Maria, then right at that moment, I knew clearly, even if I don't love her anymore, I can't just ignore her. I can never block her from my life. Because once you've been through darkness, you can't snuff out the light that once guided you, even if it's no longer shining on you. At 15, my life went from happiness to devastation. A sudden accident at a factory took my loving parents away, leaving me an orphan with nowhere to go. 2 charred bodies covered by white sheets. The police covered my eyes. "Don't look. Say goodbye to Mom and Dad." After that, I moved into an orphanage. With government support, I continued my education. To avoid feeling sad, I threw myself into studying, always ranking first in my grade. But when you excel, you tend to provoke jealousy. And knowing I was an orphan with no support, I became a target for bullying. "Eric, you're just a curse to your parents. Acting all high and mighty? Can't you learn to bow your head? How about trying it on your knees?" Bullies were never solitary. No one wants to be the one sticking out, but once someone takes the lead, everyone blindly follows without consequence. When joining the group, they unleash the most primal and extreme emotions. A red-haired guy flicked a cigarette but into my hair, shrugged. "Oops, my hand slipped." A guy in ripped jeans locked me in a bathroom stall and then told the teacher I skipped class. A round-faced boy with glasses, looking friendly, handed me a box of cookies but hid pins inside. They laughed uproariously as my mouth bled. I sought help from teachers, but they were powerless. Once, a teacher stood up for a bullied student and ended up with 2 broken ribs. A young female teacher, fresh out of college, couldn't even meet my eyes. "Eric, if you get hurt, come to my office. I'll apply medicine for you." I told the orphanage director about my experiences. She stared at me coldly. "You're not like others. Being able to continue studying is the biggest blessing. If you didn't provoke anyone, why would they single you out? Keep a low profile and don't cause trouble." Silent, I lowered my head and re-entered the darkness. That's when Maria appeared, like a goddess, pulling me from the abyss. Maria didn't have a powerful family background, but her cousin did. Her cousin's family owned the largest share of the school. No one dared to mess with him. Because of their family ties, no one dared to cross Maria. The day I was shoved into a pool again, she showed up with her cousin, kicking a bully off me, like peeling off the shadows that loomed over my life. "What kind of piggy thug are you? Go on, scram." Though just a girl, her words were commanding. I wiped the murky water from my eyes and looked at her, backlit by the sun. Sunlight filtered through the decorative windows. She seemed to glow. "Hey, you okay?" I shook my head, cleaned the water off my face, picked up the milk that had fallen, and whispered a thank you. I clutched the milk tightly. Everyone said a person like me ate dirty food, and they were afraid to even sit with me in case they caught something. She stood with her hands in her pockets, slightly leaning forward. "What's your name?" "Eric." The Eric that's always first in his grade?
Yeah.
Don't worry, from now on, I'll have my cousin watch your back. Just focus on your studies. I thought maybe my parents saw me being bullied and sent someone to protect me. Later, she really did have her cousin protect me, and those people never dared to bully me again. Slowly, I straightened my hunched back, lifted my bowed head and walked the school grounds with confidence. At least my life wasn't dirt anymore. I lived like a normal person. I laughed. I got angry. Those sleeping pills, knives, and ropes I hid never made a reappearance. No one would have guessed that Maria, a delicate girl, would become my guardian angel in those dark youthful days. That night, I recalled so much from those youthful years. Couldn't sleep. The next day, out of kindness, I asked Stella to comfort Maria. Stella stayed at her place for 3 days. During those 3 days after work, I would bring groceries over to cook, and the 3 of us would eat together. I only left after waiting for the 2 of them to fall asleep. But still, it made Maria feel more and more like I couldn't let her go. After Stella moved out from there, Maria would always come find me when Stella wasn't around. The way she suddenly acted all sincere, it meant nothing to me. It was too late. There was a time when I eagerly prepared a table of seafood for her and waited for whole hours, but she never even said a word. She once lifted me out of the darkness during our younger years, but later, she stomped me into the dust without a second thought. When she chose Leo over me, disregarding our 5-year relationship, it was Stella who cleaned me up and held me like I mattered. Stella showed me that I didn't have to be so lowly in love. I figured it out. Maria did save me once. But those 5 years were a debt I've paid off. I don't want to drag things out anymore and plan to have a proper talk with Maria. But she came to my place while Stella was working late. When I opened the door and saw her, I couldn't help but frown. What do you want? Maria looked awkward. Eric, I've missed your cooking. I scoffed. What does that have to do with me? The past few days, I only cooked because Stella was staying with you. I'm busy today, so I'm not hosting you. As I was about to close the door, she stopped it. Are you waiting for Stella? I pushed her out. Who I wait for is none of your business, Maria. Stop bothering me. Also, I glanced at the black bag she was holding. I hate seafood. I've always hated it. She was stunned. I took the chance to close the door. For 5 years, I improved my cooking skills just to make her seafood. But the truth is I don't like it, and Maria never noticed. Half an hour later, Stella came back from work. She knocked on my door with vegetables and fruits, all flavors I liked. We had planned to cook together after her overtime. I got busy in the kitchen, with Stella helping as we happily and easily spent time together. After dinner, Stella was tidying up and accidentally kicked a large gift box with a bow. Eric, what's inside? The bag's collecting dust. Seeing the box, I had a moment of haze. It was a dress I bought for Maria a week before Leo returned to the country. I never got to give it to her, so it's been gathering dust in the study. It's nothing, just junk I don't want. I'll throw it away. I picked up the box and threw it in the dumpster downstairs. Along with it went the blind devotion of the past 5 years. On the way upstairs, I bought a new dress, in Stella's size. If I'm giving her a gift, it has to be new, definitely not unwanted hand-me-downs. With the new year approaching, Maria's cousin returned from abroad. He invited me over to their place. Even though I knew I'd run into Maria, I went, since they had helped me before. And I did see Maria there. She looked much more worn out than before, visibly thinner. What caught my eye was her dress. It looked just like the one I threw out. Maria, you've lost so much weight, her cousin noticed as he looked her over. Maria was silent, just eating her food, not responding. But her cousin's wife, who had heard some things, spoke up. Maria, I heard you and Leo split? I was a bit taken aback. During our 5 years together, Maria never let friends know about us. Her cousin and his wife always thought we were just friends. Yet she had everyone, even those far away, knowing about her being with Leo in less than 3 months. So, she didn't hate being public about her relationships. She just didn't want to publicize it when it was with me. I chuckled to myself. Her cousin's wife continued, trying to console Maria. Love isn't something you can force, it has many factors. Take it easy, you and Leo weren't right. It's not about Leo, Maria suddenly said. Both her cousin and his wife were taken aback, unsure how to respond. She looked up, gazing deeply at me. I've realized the person I like now isn't Leo. Her eyes were so intense, filled with emotions I couldn't understand. If she had said this months ago, I might have been thrilled. But now? Once a wound heals, there's no more pain. But I still remember how it felt to be hurt, and I don't want to go through that again. Her cousin seemed to sense something and lightly nudged my arm. Eric? I looked up. I have a girlfriend now. Maria's face turned even paler. Throughout dinner, she hardly spoke. As soon as we left her cousin's house, Maria stopped me. Her eyes were burning with urgency, staring at me with a face full of longing. Maria's face, once so familiar. I knew every detail, even the small mole under her eye. But now it seemed distant. Her face was etched into my mind, but it's slowly fading away. She once pulled me from the abyss, and I stood by her for 5 solid years. Perhaps we're more than even now. Gathering her words, Maria finally spoke. Eric, do you really have to treat me this way? I couldn't help but laugh. Treating her like a stranger. Is that bad? That dress, why didn't you give it to me? She looked down at the dress she was wearing. It really was the one I tossed? Couldn't imagine Maria, once so proud, would pick something from the trash? I told her confidently, I bought that dress for your birthday, but that night you came home drunk. The moment you walked in, you hugged my neck and called me Leo, saying you'd only ever love Leo. That night, I couldn't even give you the present. So later, you stopped giving me any, too. You questioned me with a bit of childishness, like a kid arguing with an adult over a toy. I found it a bit funny. Then, you got with Leo, so of course I wouldn't give you the present. Maria, even if I like someone, I have my limits. She hesitated, sounding a bit more careful. I broke up with Leo. Do you still like me now? I shook my head and smiled. I stopped liking you since you pushed me away. I can now face him calmly without my heart racing for him. When I liked you, it was wholehearted. When I stopped, I truly stopped. She refused to acknowledge our relationship and pushed me toward Stella, like breaking a dam. The breach kept widening until it couldn't be fixed. I was about to leave, but she stopped me. Eric, Maria slowly said, even if you don't like me, don't use Stella to degrade yourself. Huh? I turned to look at her, feeling like I was blind for the first time. I was disappointed. Maria, being with you for 5 years was the real degradation. When I got back, Stella was waiting at my door. We were chatting just fine. But when I mentioned Maria's cousin, Nolan, Stella's expression suddenly changed. Stella, are you okay? Do you know Nolan? Stella looked away briefly and said, I heard Maria mention him before. Hasn't he been living abroad since he got married? Why is he back? I shook my head. I'm not sure, but I'll introduce you sometime. In my eyes, he's like a big brother who helped me a lot. Stella lowered her gaze, hiding her expression, and only said, okay. Not noticing anything unusual, I went to the bathroom. What I didn't see was the fear beneath her downcast eyes. The end of the year was approaching. The company was on holiday, and Stella went back home. Before she left, she had dinner with me, stood on tiptoes to hug me, and said she'd bring me something when she returned. Growing up in an orphanage, I took some time to visit the director, then went home to start my pig-out mode. I ate and slept all day, with the only activity being texting Stella. My mom made a lot of date cakes. I bet you'll like them. I'll bring some when I return. They've been pushing me to date someone. I wanted to say I already do, but I'm afraid they'll freak out and ask me to video call you to scare you. Eric, look at the TV, it's playing your favorite movie. Her messages were full of sunshine and energy. I could almost see her smile through the words. My own face was full of auntie-like smiles that I couldn't stop. Stella sent another message. Eric, I kinda miss you. Wanna chat? My heart melted, and I was about to send her a voice message when I suddenly got a call from an unknown number. But I guessed it was Maria. Before Stella went back, I felt it was bad to keep things hanging, so I blocked Maria. Answering the unknown call confirmed my guess. It was Maria. Eric, she called from the other end. Can you come out? I'm downstairs at your place. She hadn't gone back home. I was exasperated yet amused and told her, Maria, there's no point in you coming to find me. We don't need to talk anymore. I already made myself clear. Then a thought occurred, so I told her, of course you can tell Stella about our past. I was planning to tell her after the new year anyway. I believe she'd understand. She started pleading, give me one more chance. I know now I like you, Eric. I chuckled softly, but I don't like you anymore. Saying that, I felt there was no need to dwell, so I hung up. But an hour later, Maria was still there. The area around my place often had drunks and homeless people at night. For her safety and to clear things up, I went down. Under the dappled tree shadows, Maria curved her lips and looked at me, her voice carrying a tinge of cold mockery. I bet your heart is all set on Stella now? A wave of exhaustion hit me as I softly said, Maria, I've got my own life. Someday I'll have a family, a wife and children. I can't just revolve around you like before. Maria's hand clenched into a fist. Already talking about marriage? Stella's always been carefree, but you're serious. She might not be the same as you. You introduced her to me. You know her character, I replied. Plus, you know my stance on relationships. Emotions surged in Maria's eyes. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand and leaned towards me. In the past, even brushing fingers with her made me blush. But now, watching her tumble into my arms and entwine our fingers, I felt nothing stir inside me. She backed away slightly, breathing heavily against my face, fingers intertwined with mine. It almost felt like she was about to kiss. But all I felt was unfamiliar and resistant, instinctively turning my head away. Maria froze in place. Born proud, she rarely faced rejection, especially recently. And continually, it's all been coming from me. Instantly, her eyes reddened, calling my name hoarsely, Eric. I looked up, noticing a flicker of fear in her eyes. I knew what she was afraid of. For a long time, Maria had been the center of my universe. Yet, as a man, I had my pride. Still, time and time again, I'd bend backward for her, willingly being a backup plan as she stomped my feelings underfoot. When Leo first went abroad, Maria refused to part with him, packing her bags to follow him there. That summer, I was like a soulless shell, devoid even of the will to cry. I spent days on end staring out the window. If someone talked to me, I just gave a slight smile and responded. I thought I was hiding my misery well, that no one could see how down I was. But when I was cooking noodles, my hand shook and the boiling water spilled onto my foot. Jason rushed over and helped me into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let cool water run over my leg and foot. I said I didn't mean to, I just suddenly felt weak. Jason didn't say a word. After a while, he started yelling at me. What the heck is this? Can't you live without Maria? Our roommate joined in, yelling at me too. Turns out, everyone knew. They saw everything. And while I was lost in sadness over Maria leaving, they were heartbroken for me too. Later, Maria didn't find Leo and came back alone. For the next 5 years, it was just me by her side. By then, Maria seemed to realize that even I was going to leave her. I turned and went home. Worried Maria wouldn't leave, I just turned off the lights and got ready for bed. After a few minutes, the doorbell rang. I thought it was Maria coming back up, so I angrily went to open the door. As soon as I opened it, the words stuck in my throat. Are you done yet? But there was Stella, smiling all bright and cheerful. Eric, what are you talking about? I pulled her inside. I thought you'd gone back home? What are you doing here? She scratched her head, looked down, and blushed. I just missed you too much. Every year I spend my parents' birthdays with them, but you're all alone. I had to be with you for the first year. I booped her nose. Silly girl. I pulled Stella to sit on the couch. I think I saw Maria downstairs earlier. Couldn't be sure from that distance. I didn't want to hide. She wanted to meet, so I went down and set things straight. Stella twisted her fingers, looking down. I cupped her face. Don't worry, I know what you're thinking. Even if you hadn't come by tonight, I would have made it clear to her. I looked at her earnestly, my words sincere. Stella, we've been together for a while now, and I still owe you a proper confession. Tomorrow's New Year's Eve, and even if you hadn't come, I would have gone to your hometown to find you in the morning. Because I don't want to wait until next year to tell you. Stella, I like you. Like a lot. Stella gazed at me, and then tears started streaming down her face. I smiled, gently wiping away her tears, and pulled her into a hug. Happy New Year, my girlfriend. Stella and I spent New Year's together. I even posted something on social media about it. I'm sure Maria saw it too. During the holiday, she didn't show up around my building again or call me in the middle of the night. Just when I thought she had finally moved on, she knocked on my door late at night again. As soon as I opened the door, Maria drunkenly threw herself at me. Just like that time before when she came back with Leo. Except this time she wasn't calling for Leo, but my name. She clung to me. Eric, I can't take it. I regret it so much. I'm sorry I wasted 5 years of your feelings. But now I know I was just unsatisfied with Leo. The one I truly like is you. I can't stand seeing you with Stella. The closer you get, the more miserable I feel. I tried to pull away. Maria, you're drunk. Don't push me away. I just want to hold you, she said, pushing my hand aside in her drunken state. I frowned and glanced at the closed door of the adjacent room. Did Stella hear any of this? I looked back at Maria clinging to me. I freed a hand to pull out my phone and called Stella. She soon opened her room door. She looked at me, then at Maria clinging to me, and a trace of hurt flickered in her eyes. Biting her lip, she stood there. Stella. I looked back, filled with concern. Stella remained still, and just when I thought she might get mad and shut me out, she came over. She helped me get Maria off and we walked Maria back to her room together. Stella didn't say a word the whole time. Once she had changed Maria into some pajamas and got her tucked in, Stella came out of the bedroom, and I got up from the sofa, taking her hand. Stella, let's talk. There are things I want to tell you. She stayed silent but let me lead her back to sit on the couch. Stella, the truth is, Maria and I were a couple for those 5 years. But she never wanted to publicize it. Then Leo came back. She didn't want him to find out about us, so she left in the middle of the night. Stella suddenly threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly. Her action cut off my words. Eric, don't say anymore. I believe you. Let's let the past be the past. I'll be by your side from now on, always. Her voice was full of compassion. See, how lucky am I to have Stella? I hugged her back just as tightly. Neither of us noticed Maria's door was slightly cracked, with a pair of resentful eyes peering through, watching us. The next morning, Maria woke up. Stella didn't say much to her. While we were eating, Stella called me and affectionately referred to me as dear. After the meal, Maria wasn't planning to go home. She even told Stella she wanted to stay over for a couple more days. Beside me, they'd become close friends. Stella wouldn't just ignore Maria. She agreed and teasingly told me to make sure to buy ingredients and cook for them every day. I laughed and gave her a little pinch on the face. Maria kept her head down the whole time, not saying much. I thought to myself, if she likes third-wheeling so much, let her stay and keep watching. Over time, I thought she'd always back down when things got tough. But I forgot how stubborn Maria is when it comes to matters of the heart. Stella was out for a company dinner, so I was alone. Just as I reached the hallway, Maria, who was staying at Stella's, stopped me. It was already late fall in October, and the chill was in the air. She saw me and pressed her lips together. I noticed her knuckles were slightly red. She must have known Stella wasn't coming back and had been waiting for me for a while. Our relationship was never balanced. I thought after what happened last time, with her pride and dignity, she wouldn't reach out to me again for quite some time. She walked over looking tired. Probably hadn't slept well for days. Eric, I need to talk to you. I looked at her pale face and lips. She looked like her stomach issues were acting up again. Before, I would have automatically fussed over her, digging in my bag for some crackers or bread to help her stomach. I moved my fingers, remembering the bag I had now was one Maria bought for me. I'd thrown out my old bag along with all the meds and snacks for her stomach. I stayed silent. I wasn't sure what was going on with me. Maria's voice was hoarse, and she suddenly let out a strange laugh. Eric, just thinking about you marrying Stella, being with her, marrying, having kids. The thought that you'll live a life I'm not a part of feels like a wound in my heart. It makes me feel so miserable. When Leo disappeared again, it didn't hit me this hard. She murmured, "Now I know, without you, I'm nothing. Eric, this is the 16th year I've known you." She whispered, "I love you." I rejected her once again. Hearing those words from Maria, I thought I'd be restless and lose sleep. But truth be told, I slept peacefully, without a second thought of doubt or hesitation. Maria still stayed with Stella. Jason heard about our situation. He shook his head. "Man, that's a mess." I shrugged, feeling helpless. I asked Jason about Leo. Nosy as he is, Jason immediately made a call to get the scoop. After hanging up, he looked at me with a smug face. I gave him a look. "Cut the crap. Spill it. Maria probably won't give up easily. You can't wake someone pretending to be asleep. If she stays this way, you and Stella won't have peace. But I've got an idea to make Maria leave Stella's place on her own." I looked at him. "What's your plan?" "I just found out Leo's coming back. I'll set up a meeting for them, and Maria will go back to him." Jason looked confident. True love never really dies. Once they see each other, it'll come back, no doubt. I was skeptical, letting Jason do his thing. 3 days later, Jason invited me to a bar opening of a friend of his. To my surprise, I ran into Maria there. Maria was nearby holding a drink. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Jason handed me a drink and pulled me aside. "Don't mind her. Leo's here too." Jason chuckled. "Just wait for the show." I caught on. Jason nudged me, teasingly, "Look, there they go." I turned to see Leo, in a gray suit, walking toward Maria. She stood still, eyes lowered, as if lost in thought. If I were my old self, I'd be a wreck, hands trembling with embarrassment and hopelessness. The girl I once cared for deeply could never forget another guy. A constant thorn that haunted me, even making me imaginatively taste the bitterness of blood. Now, though, I felt nothing. Some friends invited me for a card game. I agreed. After a couple of rounds, both Maria and Leo were nowhere to be seen. I wasn't upset. I just smirked. Despite how devoted Maria seemed this month, the moment Leo showed up, she gave in again. Maybe it's a good thing them reconciling. It'd mean no one would bother Stella and me anymore. Just as I thought that, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I picked up, and Maria's frantic voice came through. "Eric, help me. Leo, he wants to." Then a crashing sound, and the call dropped. I rushed out, updating Stella on the situation along the way. When I arrived, I found Leo gripping Maria's jaw, forcing her to look at him. His grip was so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Suddenly, Leo laughed darkly and leaned in closer to Maria. "Friendship? You're just pathetic, Maria. You were with Eric for 5 years. I've always known. So what's with the purity act now? Tell me you truly love Eric. Aren't you just trash? Maria? Go away." Maria shook her head desperately. Leo got closer, and I stepped in, pulling him away by the collar. Leo stumbled back onto the ground. Maria was crying, breathless, shaken to her core. I couldn't bear it and draped my jacket over her. I faced Leo coldly. "Bullying women, what kind of man are you?" "Oh really? And who are you to lecture me, Eric? A good friend or an ex-boyfriend?" Leo got up, chuckling, and brushed off his pants. "Hey, don't you guys need to officially explain your relationship to me? I mean, this woman dumped you the minute I came back, and you're still helping her? Why though? It's kinda pathetic." I didn't pay attention to his words. I just glanced at the red marks on Maria's wrist and asked calmly, "Did he do that?" There was no answer. I looked into her tear-filled eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. When I was 16, I vowed to become strong enough to protect Maria from being bullied. Even though I don't have feelings for her now, I still owe her for pulling me out of a dark place. Seeing Leo hurt her is something I can't tolerate. Maria looked so pitiful as she cried, and I gently said, "Give me a minute." She nodded, tears rolling down, and said in a trembling voice, "Okay." Leo stood by, mocking, "Eric, what do you even like about her? I've already slept with her, and now she's playing the pity card. And you're falling for it again? Seriously, have some backbone. I walked towards him slowly, chuckling softly. You know, I'm glad Maria finally saw your true colors. She wasted 5 years with a guy like you. Quite the mistake. The aura I've developed over years in the business world came through at that moment. Leo is just a guy who got lucky breaking into the scene. Feeling the pressure, he unconsciously backed away a little, his gaze falling on Maria as if she was his target for release. Sneering, he said, "You think she really likes you now? She's only sticking with you because she compared us and found you're more useful. She deserved that hit." My typically composed expression darkened slightly. With force, I unfastened my perfectly tied tie, pushed him against the wall with such intensity that he stumbled a few steps. He barely had time to react. "I tried to warn you." Leo swung a punch at me. I tilted my head just in time to dodge it. The swing was wild and vicious. As things got heated, Maria worriedly intervened. As his punch was about to land, she cried out, "Eric, I told you she's just a pathetic woman." His words went unfinished. I was quicker, landing a punch to his stomach, gripping his tie tightly, lifting him. My hand was taut, muscles defined, with a frigid gleam at the joints. "Watch your mouth," I warned coldly. He groaned, clutching his stomach, slumping against the wall under my pressure. I firmly placed my right foot on his shoulder, looked down at him with cold eyes, gradually increasing pressure. A gentle person's anger can be most terrifying. Looking at Leo, I said, "She cared for you for so long. The least you can do is part ways amicably. If I catch you hitting her again, I won't be so polite. And no matter what you think of her, you don't get to be judgmental. Especially you, a lowlife." Maria stared at me blankly, slowly got up, reaching to pull me back. As she almost touched me, I stepped back a bit. "Maria, understand this. I'm helping because I'm settling what I owed, not because I still have feelings for you. Whatever was between us, I've made clear. I owe you nothing now. Don't involve me or disturb me and Stella again. Ain't nobody gonna wait around forever, so take care of yourself." Maria's eyes were filled with hurt as she looked into mine, as if trying to see if I was lying. But sadly for her, there was none of that to find. The eyes once so full of her, now filled with someone else. "This is the last time I'm helping you. A farewell to the past. From here on out, whatever happens to you is none of my business." Maria bit her lip tightly, as if holding back pain or rage. Perhaps she couldn't believe it, that the person she once thought little of would one day walk away, without a glance back. "Eric," she rasped, "after all these years, can you really tell the difference? What? After all these years, do you really know if what you felt for me was love or gratitude?" She taunted. "If you loved me as you said, why weren't you jealous when I was with Leo? Over 5 years, whomever I was nice to, you were as well. And the same for whoever was nice to me. Maria, can you tell?" Her voice was mocking yet earnest. No, I shook my head. But that was all the emotion I had. I gave all my feelings, whatever was left of them, to you. If you were nice to me, I'd have kept loving you. But you never gave me a chance to understand what loving you meant. You blocked every path. Maria just wanted me to soften again so she could control everything once more. Done with the conversation, I turned, ready to leave. Suddenly, Leo, still crouched by the wall, started laughing. "Well, since we're airing it out, I'll give you a tidbit. Guess what? I've known you since high school. But you didn't know me. I know a lot about you. When you were bullied, Maria only helped to win a bet with her friends. So, Eric, in the end, you're the biggest fool here." I paused, looking at Leo, my mouth open. "A bet?" Leo laughed more, like he had somehow won. "Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, they bet on making you fall for her, and that she could make you do anything once you did. You always saw her as your savior, pulling you from the abyss. Does learning this make you feel foolish now?" "Leo!" Maria shouted, cutting him off. "Shut up." She stood weakly, her fingers clenched so tight you could see the knuckles. She looked at me in panic, like someone was squeezing her heart, making her tremble all over. Through the cold, silent hallway, I watched her. I saw the fearless young girl she used to be, always standing in front of me. Back when she was 16, she promised to let her cousin look after me. A promise accompanied by her friend's phone recording the whole thing. She said it was to capture my rebirth. Turned out it was just a game to her. I watched her, started laughing, and tears rolled down my face. "Eric," Maria called as she walked towards me, cautiously reaching for my shoulder. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was a jerk back then. You can yell or hit me. Don't touch me." I looked up at her, my eyes red. "Maria, you made me a joke. You could have told me sooner, and I wouldn't have stuck around like this. Seeing me follow you like a dog. Did you laugh at night? You must have thought, Eric, you're such a good dog. Throw a bone and you'll follow. It's not like that." She wanted to explain, but sudden stomach pain made her bend over, unable to hold on. Leo, beside her, seemed to relish the revenge, laughing away. I clutched my bag tightly and walked out without looking back at Maria. "Eric." Behind me, Maria's hoarse voice called out. I walked fast, my eyes bloodshot, accepting what happened. Those times I thought saved me, just spur-of-the-moment games. Back home, seeing Stella, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I went up and hugged her tightly. Even as a guy, I couldn't stop the tears. "Eric," Stella held me tightly. "If things are bad, tell me. I'm here for you." I leaned on her shoulder, giving a gentle kiss on her collarbone. It was our first intimate gesture. Stella jumped back like she'd been shocked, stepping away from me. Her eyes were terrified, like she remembered something awful. Watching her move, I thought maybe kissing her had scared her. I tried to comfort her. "Stella, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that." Maria tightly clenched her fingers to calm down. "No, Eric," she said. "I have some bad memories, so I went to her, gently hugged her. "Don't worry. I won't do anything you don't want." Stella looked up from my arms. "Don't you want to know what happened?" "It's in the past," I replied. "It doesn't matter, right?" Tears filled Stella's eyes. As she leaned back into me, she started to sob gently. "Eric, have you thought maybe I'm not as great as you think?" With my chin on her head, I said, "I never thought you were perfect. I just know I'm happy with you." I had a hunch Stella had gone through something bad, but I knew she had her reasons not to share it. Eric had blocked Maria's other number too. She couldn't reach him at all. Sitting outside his apartment building all night, her eyes were red. Upstairs, a light flickered on briefly, and she felt a searing pain in her mind. In a daze, she found the floor and knocked with all her strength. A woman quickly opened the door, not wanting to disturb anyone inside. Stella answered, her hair loose, wearing loose pajamas. "She stayed over?" Maria dug her fingers into her palm, looking past Stella into the apartment. She demanded, "Let Eric come out." I came out wearing a coat, seeing Maria at the door. Stella stepped aside. "Eric, you two talk. You didn't eat much. Since you're up, I'll make some noodles," Stella said, heading to the kitchen. Maria's face was flushed with a fever. She always turned red from face to neck when sick, frighteningly red. She pulled out a small red velvet box from her pocket, her hand shaking. Inside were matching rings. "You said when we get married, we'd engrave our initials on them. I ordered your favorite style. You also said you wanted to honeymoon in Bali. I booked the tickets. We can leave next week. Eric, I wasn't good before, but we've been through so much. I'm awake now. Can we start over?" These were things I once dreamt of. I'd imagined 1,000 times she'd turn back and hold my hand. Why do we long for broken mirrors to become whole again? Once desired dreams lay before me, now they stirred nothing. I glanced at Maria. "Maria." I didn't say it twice. "For all these years, thank you. Whether real or fake, without Maria, I wouldn't have survived school. Believe it or not, I truly liked you for years. Not just feelings. My entire gloomy adolescence revolved around you. No one can resist a savior, Maria. You should be happy for me. You didn't drain my courage to love. That's your greatest gift to me." Maria's eyes were wet. "Am I that unforgivable, Eric?" I pulled a blue velvet box from my coat and opened it in front of her. Inside was a diamond ring. "Look," I whispered. "I'm ready to propose to Stella. This whole thing should end." She lowered her head, tapping that diamond ring with her finger, a sorrowful smile on her face. Countless times in the past, I'd always trailed close behind him, looking up at her. One summer when I was 16, she boldly shouted at the school playground, "Everyone listen up. Eric is under my protection from now on. You all better stop bullying him." She once walked against the light towards me, and now, just the same, she walks against the light, cutting through the crowd, forging a path out of my remaining years. "Maria, let's just not make it complicated anymore," I said, and Maria closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something flashed beneath her gaze. "Eric, I can let go, but you can't marry Stella. Because her getting close to you was a bet between us all along. You hate being deceived, and I'm telling you this truth now, rather than letting you suffer the same pain years later." With that said, Maria pulled out her phone, playing a recording. Stella's voice came out clearly. "Maria, you mean let me seduce Eric, make him fall for me so no one bothers you and Leo, right? Relax, it's easy. Remember when I got drunk at the bar and kept clinging to him? He definitely remembers me. You're with Leo now, he's obviously at his saddest. If I show up now, winning him over is just a matter of time. Of course, I'll play it like I don't know about you two from before. You can rest easy. I won't let him ruin you and Leo." Hearing Stella's voice on the recording, it felt like a bolt from the blue. My hands and feet turned icy cold. No wonder whenever Maria showed up, Stella never asked about our past. She didn't just want to know. She already knew. For years, I'd seen Maria as the light in my life. In the end, it was just a bet. The lights went out, transforming into a chilling darkness, almost swallowing me whole. The past few months, I saw Stella as the hope in my dim life. Turned out to be a scam too. What I thought would grow brighter was, instead, snuffed out in such a cruel way. I was always the puppet in someone's story. My heart felt like it was in a tight grip, forced to stop beating. Hearing a noise, Stella came out from the kitchen with a spoon in hand. She stared at Maria in disbelief. "Maria, you." Then her gaze locked onto mine, red-rimmed eyes, lips trembling. Despite the twisting pain deep inside me, I quietly watched her. Without turning, I spoke to the Maria behind me. "You should go. Stella and I will deal with this ourselves." "All right." What I didn't notice was the slight curl of Maria's lips as she turned away. I looked at Stella, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she started, her voice trembling. "Eric, yes, I said those things. But not all of it was true." I didn't respond. The kitchen's boiling sounds became a kind of backdrop, as we stared at each other in silence. Breath by breath, the vulnerability in her eyes grew, silently overflowing along with her reddened eyes. "I noticed you since middle school. When I found out you knew Maria, do you know how happy I was? But you seem to have forgotten me, only having eyes for Maria. Maria is my best friend. All these years, I couldn't express my feelings, only keeping them hidden. When Maria came to me, I was really happy. I finally had a chance to reach out to you openly." Tears rolled from the corner of her eye. "Do you believe me, Eric?" Belief wasn't really the issue, my mind was a mess. I didn't want to make decisions impulsively, thinking it wouldn't be fair to anyone. Looking at her, I softly said, "We're not calm right now. Making any decisions wouldn't be good. Let's each take some time to chill first." Stella lowered her gaze, then took off the apron she wore. "I'll leave first. I'll wait for your reply." Once the door closed, an unknown emotion welled up, turning my eyes red. The next day, I took off from work and lounged at home all day. Neither Maria nor Stella contacted me during. In the evening, Stella sent a text saying she'd be out of town for a week. It gave me a week to seriously think about us. I replied with, "Okay." A moment later, Stella texted again, "Eric, maybe you feel I'm part of a scam, but I assure you, I'm serious about our future together now." Staring at the screen, I finally texted back, "Have a good trip, don't overthink." Stella truly gave me space. She didn't bother me during her trip, but everything around me was tinged with her memory. The balcony was full of her favorite orchids. The fridge stored the dumplings and favorite dishes she prepared. No matter where I went in my home, All I could recall were moments with her. To be honest, I couldn't forget Stella. Since knowing her, I genuinely felt her sincerity. Unable to stay quietly at home, I took out the trash. A couple stood at the stairwell, talking. Going forward felt awkward, and I couldn't head back before tossing the trash. So I just stood at the corner, thinking they'll leave soon enough. At that corner, I clearly heard their conversation. The boy said, "Babe, come back? I really miss you." After a pause, the girl replied, "But I lied to you, aren't you mad?" Hearing that, I got curious, slightly leaning my head forward. The boy gently brushed away the strands of hair on the girl's forehead and said, "Even though you lied to me, you didn't really hurt me, did you? Plus, I truly felt loved by you. We may have started with a lie, but that doesn't mean we have to live in lies from now on. I just know I don't want to miss out on you, so I came to find you." After he spoke, the girl cried tears of joy. The boy pulled her into a hug and said, "Silly, I almost lost you." Seeing this, it all suddenly made sense to me. Even though Stella lied to me too, she's not the same as Maria. I felt genuine feelings from her too. I remembered when she took me to see the fireworks. Under the dazzling display, she asked me, "Eric, if you found out one day that I lied to you, would you stop talking to me?" Back then, I replied, "You're so good, if you lied, there must be a reason, and I'd be willing to listen to your explanation." It was a promise I made to her, but somehow I forgot it that night. Right then, I found myself missing her terribly, so I picked up my phone and sent her a message. "Is your business trip going well?" Stella replied quickly, "Everything is good." I sent back a smiley face. Just 2 seconds later, Stella sent a few photos. Then she eagerly told me about things that happened while she was away. It was like nothing ever happened between us, and we were back to sharing everything just like before. Maybe because I opened up to Stella, my mood lifted considerably. Immersed in work, I forgot to eat lunch. A coworker returned from lunch and told me there was a pretty lady waiting for me downstairs, saying she had something to tell me. Maria was the first person who came to mind. When I got downstairs, sure enough, it was her. She looked well. Seeing me, she didn't rush over right away. She just stood there with a gentle smile. I took a deep breath and spoke first. "Want to grab a coffee across the street?" Maria nodded. When the server brought our coffee, Maria stirred hers and began, "Eric, are you okay? I've been worried, thinking I hurt you with my impulsive actions." I took a sip from my cup. Stella and I talked things out. I believe that even if you hadn't told me, she would have eventually confessed. As soon as I spoke, Maria's eyes dimmed. After a while, she finally smiled awkwardly. "Is that so?" She took a sip of her coffee, her hand shaking slightly, almost spilling it. After setting her cup down, she looked up and asked, "How come you can forgive her, but not me?" Cold wind slipped through the window, swirling around us. I suddenly recalled a day from our 5 years together. We had another silly fight, and she stormed out, leaving shattered dishes on the floor. The sunlight reflected off the broken pieces, hurting my eyes and heart. Bending down, I pulled out the book I once gifted to her, now used as a table leg support, a paperback titled The Myth of Sisyphus. On the inside cover, there was a phrase I wrote back in high school when I gave it to her. "Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend. Maria, at one time I wished the person standing by me would be you. But you're the one who didn't want that. You didn't want to forget Leo, you didn't choose me, you didn't want to move forward with me. Both your and Stella's relationships started with lies, but there was a difference. She chose to stand by my side." I looked at her and finally spoke softly. "Maria, let's end it here. Let's not drag this any longer. Let's both be well and not look back." With that, I stood up to leave, but Maria stopped me. "Eric, I actually came today to tell you that Leo got taken by the police. Drug dealing. Even at minimum, he's looking at over 10 years. I paused. Maria said that Leo got addicted to drugs abroad and returned home to deal for money. He was arrested by the police during an exchange. After that, Maria didn't come looking for me anymore. But Stella ended her business trip early. When she called, She'd already landed and left the airport. As soon as I answered, she started, "Eric, there are so many things about me I wanted to tell you after the trip, but I can't wait any longer. I'm coming over to tell you everything today." I was confused but sensed her urgency. The knock on the door soon followed. I opened it to find Stella standing there. Before I could say anything, her phone rang. "Hello? Is this Stella, David's family? Please come to the emergency room at City Hospital A." In the small space, I also heard the doctor's anxious voice from the other end. In a panic, Stella grabbed my wrist. "Eric, take me to the city hospital." Her voice was trembling. I looked at her, stayed silent, and led her downstairs. The hospital was crowded. Since knowing her, Stella had always been the calm one in tough situations. But now she was like a headless chicken, rushing to find the emergency room. "Follow me." I suddenly took hold of her hand. "I know a doctor here, don't worry." I led her through a crowded corridor. She pressed close to me like we were squeezing into a rush-hour subway. Freeing a hand, I made a quick call. Soon, a doctor in a white coat came down to us. "David, right? He has a history of heart issues?" the doctor asked as he led us through a VIP corridor. Stella quickly nodded. "Is it a heart attack?" she asked. "Got into a group fight and got kicked in the chest." Stella had told me about her brother before. From the way she spoke, I could tell he seemed like a decent guy. Quite gutsy, taking the first swing even when outnumbered. I was with Stella when we walked up. Stella's brother's colleague from the security company had called in the emergency. Stella knew him too. Sitting in the hallway outside the ER, smoking, he saw Stella and his first words were, "Stella, what trouble did you get yourself into outside behind your brother's back?" A nurse came over to remind him smoking wasn't allowed. He tossed the cigarette on the ground and crushed it with his foot, then pulled out another one and held it between his fingers, sighing. "Someone said right to your brother's face that you're messing around with your own best friend's boyfriend, even getting with him." I was taken aback. Was it Maria again? I got the gist of it. David worked as a security guard outside an investment group. A few guys had passed by, joking, "Know him?" Heard his sister snagged her best friend's boyfriend. And get this, her friend saved his life once. And that job? His sister's friend hooked him up with it. Unbelievable, backstabbing like that, no good at all. Yeah, seriously, can't she find any guy except her friends? Stella seemed like she'd fallen into a pit of ice, trembling all over. Did her brother hear these rumors and then get into a fight? I stepped aside, ready to call Maria. But my phone rang first. It was Maria's cousin, Nolan. "You're at First People's Hospital, right? This isn't Maria's doing, it was me. Come down to the parking lot. Bring Stella with you." I gripped my phone tightly. I knew things might not be as simple as they seemed, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. I was scared. Scared there was really something between Stella and Nolan. With anyone else, I could handle it. But with Nolan? Stella walked over. "This Nolan, isn't it?" Before I could answer, she chuckled bitterly. "Eric, a lot of things can't wait for me to tell you anymore." With that, Stella started walking ahead. I caught up with her. By the time we got to the parking lot, Nolan was already there, leaning against his black Maybach, cigarette in hand. He squinted at us when we approached, but didn't acknowledge me, just nodded at Stella to come over. Stella glanced at me and didn't move, eyes full of anguish. Nolan smirked. I'd always seen him as some sort of high and mighty figure, like a big brother to me. But now, his demeanor seemed alien to me. My instincts screamed there was something going on between him and Stella. No wonder Stella was so off when I first mentioned Nolan to her. "Come here," Nolan said again. Stella bit her lip and stood her ground. Nolan raised an eyebrow and walked over himself. He gently reached out and played with Stella's hair. I stood there, fists clenched, unable to move. If Maria was the light in my dark teenage years, Nolan was the rock that helped me in adulthood. He convinced his dad to fund my undergrad and master's degree. We swore brotherhood back then, with me vowing to treat him as my own brother. Never in my wildest dreams did I think he'd be involved with Stella. David called the cops. "Did you know that?" Nolan said. Stella was shocked. Who called them? Your brother did. Nolan laughed with more pleasure. He suddenly grabbed Stella's hair and yanked it down hard. Stella grimaced in pain, letting out a hiss. I clenched my fist tighter, stepping forward. Stop. Don't. Stella's voice stopped me in my tracks. Nolan ignored me. Stella, don't play these little games with me. You think your brother getting locked up sets you free? Dream on. Even if you die, you're just a toy I've played with. Remember how you used to beg me? Go on, beg. The information hit me like a truck. What on earth was the relationship between Stella and Nolan? She was on the verge of tears, instinctively pushing him away and saying, "Let me go." Somehow that ticked Nolan off. He dropped the cigarette butt and grabbed her waist, bending down to bite her collarbone. Watching that, I remembered Stella's reaction the first time I touched her collarbone. Was Nolan the shadow she'd been carrying? Nolan's breath reeked of cigarette smoke, and Stella couldn't take it, coughing violently. I couldn't stand it any longer. I charged forward, and under Stella's gaze, swung my fist straight at Nolan's face. This time I chose to believe in Stella. I put enough force into it that blood soon appeared at the corner of Nolan's mouth. Are you out of your mind? Nolan looked up, staring straight at me. We're sworn brothers, and you'd hit me for a woman? He wiped his mouth. You had no clue, did you? She's been with me for 7 years. And you're the reason you're over Maria? These days, do you know how Maria's been? She's like a zombie at home, crying about losing you. If I'd known that night you were into Stella, I'd have knocked some sense into you. Because this woman is far dirtier than you see. Nolan spoke, pulling Stella back behind him. I don't really know what happened between you and Maria. I don't want to meddle too much, but giving up Maria for this woman? You're making a huge mistake. Enough. I cut Nolan off. I've always respected you as the big brother. But now, with your wife at home, you come here and won't leave my girlfriend alone, spouting all that nasty talk. I don't care what happened before. What I know is, Stella's my girlfriend now, and I'll protect her. No one can hurt her. I look over at Stella and reach out my hand. Let's go home, Stella. Stella's gripping her hands tight, her nails digging into her palms. I know what's on her mind. I repeat, don't worry too much. Trust me, I can handle everything. Just as Stella hesitates, Nolan turns, pinches her cheek. You go on, let me talk to him, Stella. This situation, it needs solving. I nod at Stella, and she finally turns and heads toward the hospital building. Stella sits in the ER hallway. Her brother's colleague is with the police, giving a statement. She's alone, sitting on the bench outside, her mind a whirlwind. She regrets not telling Eric about her and Nolan sooner. All she hopes is that Eric won't get hurt. 10 years ago, the first time Stella met Nolan, she was just as scared as she is now. Nolan's assistant had called, saying her brother got into some trouble at the company. So she took half the day off and headed to Nolan's office by taxi. He sat behind his desk, sizing her up. Industrial espionage, you know? She shook her head. After all, law wasn't her thing. Your brother works for us and took one of our collaboration agreement content to sell to a competitor. Do you know how much we'd lose if the bid fails? She shook her head again, like an idiot. 10 billion, he said flatly. Stella wasn't sure if he was bluffing, but for a student whose monthly allowance was just $1,000, that number was astronomical. She swallowed hard. Can he pay the compensation? If not, he'll just go to jail. Tears welled up. Please, he just wanted to earn my tuition. I know he has no skills and doesn't want to disappoint anyone. Stella was babbling, unsure of her own words. Mistakes must bring consequences, but since it was her brother, she couldn't ignore it or be heartless. Nolan patted her head, lifted her chin. I don't like losing out. You don't have money, what else can you give me? Stella stayed silent. He moved closer, chuckling as he pressed against her lips. That's how Stella ended up with Nolan for 7 years. 7 whole years he kept her by his side, with no one outside knowing. Until 3 years ago, when Nolan decided to marry the daughter of a wealthy family. That's when he finally let her go. During that time, she met Maria and became best friends, and reconnected with Eric, whom she'd had a crush on since the 9th grade. She covered her face. If she could do it all over again, she wasn't sure if she'd make the same choices. Someone sat gently next to her. Stella. Eric placed his hand on hers, then grasped it. You don't have to go back. I've sorted things with Nolan. When I came up from the parking lot, Stella was on the bench, her face buried, looking miserable. I walked over and wrapped her in my arms. I know it all. Stella froze for a moment, murmuring, but what did he say? I wasn't pleased with her reaction, held her tighter, rested my chin on her forehead. Don't think about him anymore. You shouldn't see him again. I took her wrist, leading her to find the doctor. Her brother was out of the ER, but still not stable. The doctor said if he couldn't make it through the observation period, he might not wake up. A nearby cop was making notes. With my arm around Stella's shoulder, I asked what'll happen with those guys who attacked him. The cop, writing, said, the attackers are detained, but since your side started the fight, we'll have to determine the responsibilities as we proceed. We'll let you know if there are updates. I drove Stella back to the apartment complex. She didn't say much on the way, but I could tell she was conflicted. I stopped at the mall, bought a bag of stuff, including a small bottle of wine. Stella looked at the wine, asking, do you remember our second meeting? This was the wine we had. I tried to remember, and it hit me we did have wine together in 9th grade. I was in 9th, she was in 8th. It was just before my family was set to move. I was reluctant to leave everything, so I went to the rooftop after class to take it all in one last time. On the rooftop, I heard crying. After some searching, I found Stella sobbing behind a stone pillar. I asked her what was wrong. She looked at me, teary-eyed, and said, don't comfort me. Only wine can ease my sorrow, and you can't exactly take me out drinking, so just leave me alone. I was taken aback, then laughed. Actually, I can take you out. So, I ended up sneaking her out of evening studies, pretending we were young outlaws at a bar, ordering a bottle of wine. But after moving, I met Maria and completely forgot Stella. Turns out our fate was sealed back then. I forgot, but she always remembered. No wonder that time in the bar when she was drunk and saw me. She came at me excitedly, practically dancing. Her cheeks were flushed, and she held on to me tightly, refusing to let go. Eric, I dreamed about you again. It felt so real, she said eagerly. I was taken aback. I really want to be with you. Would you be with me? Her words echoed what Nolan had just told me. A sharp pain pierced my heart. I had forgotten about Stella completely. Didn't even recognize her last time we met. Is this some kind of punishment from above? Nolan had shared 2 things with me back in the parking lot. Stella had worked hard for 7 years to study abroad. Just as she was about to make it happen, she met me. For me, she chose to stay. I only found out how much she sacrificed when Nolan told me. I thought I'd treat her well for giving up her dreams for me. But then Nolan dropped another bombshell. 4 years ago, Maria secretly paid off a $200,000 loan shark debt my parents left. That lender tried to harm Maria afterward. She had to jump into a freezing river to escape in the dead of winter. Even though she was rescued, she ended up unable to have kids due to the cold. I didn't know if what Nolan said about Maria was true or not. I needed time to verify it. In my mind, during the 5 years we were together, she barely paid attention to me, only thinking about Leo. Honestly, I'm not sure if I can trust Nolan's words. I'm torn between love and gratitude. Stella is willing to give up her dreams for me. As I drive, lost in thought, I make sure Stella in the passenger seat doesn't see my turmoil. Once home, I head to the kitchen to start cooking, while Stella sits daydreaming in the dining room. Bringing the food over, I pour her some wine. Want a drink? She nods. Her tolerance is terrible today. After 2 glasses, she's already tipsy. It's probably all the stuff she's kept inside. Plus, she starts talking nonsense. Stella sits on my lap, grabbing my collar. I smile, quit messing around. She starts playing with my face. How'd you find out about my brother? Did that jerk Nolan slip up? She asked. I take her hands, holding them. Yeah, he said we can't be together. Told me not to dream. 'Cause he has evidence against your brother, saying you can't escape. Her eyes darken, and she buries her face in my chest, like an ostrich hiding. He's right, Eric. I thought him getting married would end it, and he didn't bother me for 3 years. I just realized I can never go back since that first wrong decision. Don't say that. I lift her face. Nolan won't bother you anymore. Time to live your life. Really? She asked hopefully. Really, I assure, watching her. She falls asleep on the couch, and I carry her to bed. As she lies down, she mutters, "Mom, Dad, I've let you down. I've let my brother down. He's been hoping I'd study abroad for years. But I don't want to lose Eric or leave him. I won't go abroad. I don't need it." As she falls into a deeper sleep, I tuck her in. "You fool, I'm not worth that. You need to chase your dreams," I whisper. Heading back to the balcony, I call Nolan. Once it connects, I say, "I've thought it through. I agree to what you suggested." "Great," Nolan replies, sounding pleased. I frown, keeping my tone cold. "Remember, leave her alone. Drop her brother's issue." He chuckles. "I always keep my word. And believe me, my love for Stella is more than you can imagine. Sometimes the best way is not to interfere." He pauses, then adds, "Maria's not doing well lately. No matter what happened between you, now you know what she did for you. Be kinder to her." I don't respond, just say, "I need to verify about Maria." Nolan laughs louder. "Isn't Ken your best bet?" The next morning, after dropping Stella at work, I take the day off. I drive out to the countryside, eventually stopping at a construction site. I roll down my window, light a cigarette, and watch the smoke mix with the dust from the excavators. I flick the ash, watching Ken work with the cement. Ken was once a partner with my parents. They worked together for over 2 years until he tricked them. After that, business failed, and we owed him a ton of money we couldn't pay back. My parents had to work off that debt in a sweatshop, eventually dying in a horrific accident at work. That left me an orphan. It was all Ken's doing. During college, Ken kept haunting me, coming around for more. During my entire time in the combined bachelor's and master's program, I was miserable. In the first year after graduation, Ken still wouldn't leave me alone. As soon as I received my paycheck back then, I'd immediately give it back to him. But in the second year, he disappeared, like he just vanished from the face of the earth. It wasn't until a year ago that a friend casually mentioned he got into gambling during his startup phase and racked up a ton of debt, having no choice but to work on a construction site. In my opinion, he got what he deserved. I closed my eyes. Even now, I really hope Maria wasn't the one who helped me back then. I've completely given up on her. With what's happening now, I genuinely have no idea what to do. My car just stood still on the side of the road. After a while, the site started moving sand and stones in this direction. Group after group of workers passed by. Ken was at the end, hauling a cart of cement. Even though he was the supervisor in name, the work was far from easy. After a year of not seeing him, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. His face was weather-beaten, covered with wrinkles. As he passed my car, he was startled for a moment, turning his head to look at me, then leaned over quickly, grabbing the car window. "Eric?" he called out, his tone humble and respectful. "Are you just passing through here?" I shook my head. The remainder of my cigarette but fell onto Ken's hand, making him yelp and ouch. But he didn't dare show any displeasure. He silently rubbed his hand. I knew he was well aware that my friend and our company were working together on this site. A single word from me could cost him his job. "I came here on purpose," I said coldly, remembering the past and not feeling happy about it. That sentence really shocked Ken. "So, what do you want me to do? Would an apology do?" Ken said, trembling. Seeing me remain silent, he raised his own hand and started slapping it across his face wildly. I was immature before, made too many offenses. I was a jerk. I wasn't human. I watched coolly as Ken's face slowly became swollen and red. Eventually, I finally gestured for Ken to stop. "Do you know who you owe an apology to?" I stared at Ken's trembling face, saying it word by word. "You owe an apology to my parents. You betrayed their trust. More importantly, you owe an apology to the girl you drove to jump into the river 4 years ago, who can now never have children. Taking you to the police right now wouldn't be excessive. Ken trembled violently in fear, suddenly kneeling to the ground and bowing his head. As he knocked his head on the ground, he kept saying, "That girl Maria, I didn't mean to do anything to her. After she gave me the money, I forgot to give her the receipt, so I chased after her. Unexpectedly, she thought I was going to harm her. Defiantly, she jumped into the icy river. At that moment, it was indeed Maria. I staggered slightly, cutting Ken off. When did this happen?" Ken recalled shakily, adding, "It seems like December 5th, 2020. In December 4 years ago, I was just assigned to a business trip out of town. So Maria was hospitalized at that time. For 4 years, she hadn't mentioned it once to me. I didn't know how to describe what I was feeling now. On one hand, I learned that Stella was willing to give up years of dreams for me. On the other hand, I found out that during my worst times, it was Maria who saved me. I laughed at myself. Life has been cruel to me. I don't know how I got back to the city, but as I neared the company, I got a call from Stella. She said the doctor reported her brother had a brief moment of consciousness, but he wasn't in great condition. He could wake up any time again, so she needed to be by his side. Stella was already stationed at the hospital. I drove there immediately. Just as I reached the hospital, I saw David was already awake. Despite being very weak, he clutched Stella's hand tightly, talking. Remembering what Nolan said the other day, I didn't rush in. Instead, I stood by the door listening quietly. David, weakly, instructed Stella to retrieve a card from the nightstand drawer. "This is the money I saved for your overseas study," he said. "Your dream has always been to study abroad. Mom and Dad thought sending someone abroad would be a source of pride. I might not make it, and I can't save for you any longer. Once you're abroad, you'll have to rely on yourself." Stella cried, "Brother, don't say things like that. I need you here with me." David smiled, saying, "Don't cry. I want to see you go abroad." "Okay." Stella nodded through her tears. Seeing all this from outside the door left me with mixed emotions. Studying abroad wasn't just a dream for Stella anymore. I texted Stella, saying there's an urgent matter at work and I'll come by later. After leaving the hospital, I called a friend working at the same company as Stella, inquiring about the deadline to register for studying abroad, which was the next day. I asked them to prepare the application forms, rushed back to grab some of Stella's documents, and went to sign her up. I didn't want to regret anything, for her or myself. Together with Jason, we met our friend. With their help, I signed Stella up. My friend said she'd inform Stella when she's at work tomorrow. Leaving her place, an emergency broadcast lit up on the screen across the street. It reported that a member of a drug trafficking gang, Leo, had escaped during a prison transfer. His whereabouts were unknown, with the police actively searching for him. People with related information were urged to call the hotline. Leo escaped? I froze momentarily, standing there bewildered. Whether Leo was in jail or on the run, my first thought was, would he look for Maria? Maria had once told me that she provided the police with the tip that got Leo arrested. Just as I was pondering this, my phone rang, interrupting all my thoughts. It was Leo's voice, dry and exhausted. "Eric, at Central Tower, I need to see you." "I'm not going," I said. "I have nothing to talk about with you." "Leo, just turn yourself in. Go for a plea deal. Otherwise, with jailbreak and drug trafficking, you're looking at life." He seemed infuriated by my words and burst into laughter. "Don't waste your breath on me. I've got Maria with me right now. Eric, you have half an hour to get here. Don't think you're squeaky clean. If it wasn't for you, she'd still be loyal to me, and we'd be leaving the country. If you don't come, you'll push me over the edge and we can all go down together." After hanging up, I thought about contacting Nolan. But knowing his personality, he'd likely act recklessly and anger Leo. Then Jason came by, flipping out when he heard what happened. "This guy just can't stay dead. Can he? Already arrested, and he escapes right under the cops' noses? I bet he's set a trap waiting for you," Jason ranted. "Screw it, I'm calling the cops right now. Let's see who ends up in the ground first." I stayed silent as he freaked out. Jason turned to me, wide-eyed. "Hey, Eric, you're not seriously thinking of going, are you?" Taking a deep breath, I replied, "If he's daring enough to give us his location, He's probably not scared of us calling the cops. Maria's his captive now. He's lost his humanity. He'll hurt her. I'll go and keep him busy. You call the cops, make sure he doesn't get away." Jason steadied me, saying, "Are you nuts? What heroics are you trying to pull? Look, it's all because of me, and Maria's done a lot for me. I can't gamble with her life. Just get the police over." I put on a calm front for Jason, but as I drove, my heart was filled with dread. In that old parking lot, Maria was slowly coming to. Her eyes were covered. She couldn't make out her surroundings. Memories came crashing back. She had planned to meet a friend for a day out. In the mall's underground parking, she had parked and felt a distinct gaze on her. When she turned around, she saw nothing. She picked up her pace, trying to reach the elevator swiftly. The lighting in the basement was dim, the environment eerily silent. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed behind her. An acrid-smelling cloth covered her face the next second. As she remembered this, the fabric over her eyes was pulled away. She never expected the first person she'd see upon waking was Leo. The place appeared to be an old parking lot. Leo gave her a glance, then went back to the chair nearby, wearing that familiar yet alien smile from her memories. She was bound tightly, her mouth gagged. She tried to move, tried to sit up, but couldn't. Her mind was a mess. She knew it was her report that got Leo in trouble. There's no way he'd let her go. Before Maria could think further, Leo was approaching again. She watched him warily, but he only helped her sit up, his gaze settling on her face. With gloved hands, he softly stroked Maria's face, his eyes uncomfortably tender. "Maria, wouldn't it be great if you just kept loving me? You waited for me for 5 years, and now I'm back. But when Eric started his new life, you weren't happy anymore. If you hadn't changed, maybe I'd have taken you abroad by now." Maria couldn't grasp what he was thinking. She couldn't speak or move, forced to endure his touch as he continued caressing her face. Then his expression turned vicious. His grip on her face tightened. Fear and discomfort made her struggle, but it was futile. Thankfully, he released her quickly, his demeanor reverting to normal. He dragged a chair over and sat in front of her. "Let me tell you about my overseas adventures these last 5 years," Leo said, beginning his monologue about life abroad. He wrapped it up by adding, "I just wanted to see you before leaving, but you dumped Eric and ran to me, made me change my mind. Now that you've had me, you want to ditch me like you did Eric." Maria, unwilling to hear more, tried to turn her head away, but Leo grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "I'm no Eric. I can't tolerate some things. Didn't you say you realized you truly loved Eric?" Leo glanced at his watch. "He should be here soon. I'll do you a favor today, let you both die together." Maria stared at Leo in disbelief. He told Eric? Would Eric even care to save her? I sped up. The longer it took to reach Leo, the more I feared he'd harm Maria. If he dealt drugs, he's got a dark soul. All I could do was hope he wouldn't hurt Maria. When I arrived, Leo was in a secluded corner of the parking lot. Cigarette butts littered the ground. Hearing footsteps, I looked up. In the flickering lights, his face looked gaunt, eyes bloodshot like he'd been up for days. I stopped around 50 meters from him. He stood with hands in pockets, slightly bowing his head. "What's the matter? Afraid to even come closer?" I stayed put. "Where's Maria?" Leo smirked, gesturing with his cigarette. "Eric, you're pitiful. After all she's done, you still come to save her." He then yanked Maria, bound tightly and hidden behind a beat-up car, into view, ripping the tape off her mouth. "Eric, help me!" Maria cried out as soon as she saw me. Leo, standing nearby, laughed even harder. "Ah, the two of you really have a thing going, don't you? So touching. How about I send you both down together then?" Hearing Leo say that, I worried he might do something rash, so I quickly shouted, "Leo, are you nuts? Kidnapping's already a crime, but if you take a life, you're looking at the death penalty if you get caught." "Really?" Leo said lightly. "More than that, I want to see what kind of heart-wrenching look you two have when you die in front of me. Plus, with you two keeping each other company in the afterlife, I won't be lonely." Leo's completely lost it. He pulled out a gun from inside his jacket and pressed the metallic barrel against Maria's forehead. What if I pull the trigger right now? What would your expression be? Leo. My voice shook as I called out to him. He closed his eyes briefly. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, the sound of police sirens wailed outside. In the next second, several SWAT officers burst in from behind Leo. Quick as a flash, Leo dodged to the side and yelled, "Nobody move!" He then turned to Maria, who was tied up. "Maria, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have gone abroad 5 years ago. I was insecure back then, felt unworthy of you. I wanted to prove to your family that I could make a fortune overseas." He started smiling, but then tears streamed down his face. "Maria, be happy, okay?" Then he lifted the gun to his head. The gunshot rang out. Blood started pooling on the ground, spreading forward endlessly. The sight of the red blood was blindingly stark. Maria broke down, collapsing to the floor. I rushed over to untie her. Suddenly, she threw herself into my arms. I instinctively resisted, but then noticed Stella making her way through the crowd. Remembering something, I wrapped my arms around the sobbing Maria. Stella approached, seeing me holding Maria tightly. "Eric, what does this mean?" Her voice was full of hurt. Each word felt like a knife piercing through me. "So, this is why you secretly signed me up to go abroad?" Stella's tears streamed down her face. I swallowed the pain in my heart and pretended to be impatient. "Some things are better left unsaid. Everyone will be better off if you don't say it. What you see is the truth." Saying that, I picked up Maria and headed out. "Eric, I don't believe it. If you can't forget Maria, what were all those moments with me supposed to mean? You're lying to me, aren't you?" Hearing the sobs behind me made my heart tighten, feeling like it could collapse and shatter any moment, leaving me gasping for breath. I stopped and turned around. "Yes, I've been lying to you. It's time for you to wake up and stop wasting time on someone like me." Stella bent over, clutching her chest in pain, unable to speak. Jason gave me a frown. Though he didn't know my reasons, he still went over to help Stella up. Seeing Stella in such agony almost made me want to rush to her. But I remembered what Nolan said, remembered David's hopes, and Stella's 7 years of hard work. Without hesitation, I turned back and continued carrying Maria forward. I clenched my teeth, using all my strength, holding back the pain until my bones ached, just so I wouldn't let out a sob. In my arms, Maria looked at me and asked, "Eric, you?" I didn't look at her, just stared ahead and replied, "Sorry for making you part of the act." Maria's eyes dimmed immediately. "It was just an act?" I didn't respond further. After taking Maria to the hospital and leaving her with her family, I headed to the parking lot and called Jason for an update on Stella's situation. Upon learning she was safely home, I finally relaxed. Hanging up the phone, I collapsed onto the steering wheel, my eyes welling up. "Stella, I hope you get better and better. I'm not worth it." To cut off Stella's feelings completely, I moved houses and deliberately avoided chances to meet her. Maria called and looked for me several times, but I turned her down. I knew clearly, I liked Stella, I really did. Rejecting her wasn't because I had lingering feelings for Maria. I just wanted Stella to chase her dreams bravely. At one point, I considered going abroad with Stella, supporting her dreams. But there was always Nolan standing in the way. He said if I didn't let go, he'd threaten Stella. I couldn't compete with Nolan given my current capabilities. Moreover, Nolan promised me he'd find the best hospital for David's treatment abroad. I called Nolan about David's situation. The next morning, I got news from the hospital that David had been taken abroad for treatment with medical staff in attendance. Yet, what I didn't expect was for Stella to find me the day before she left. Seeing me, her first words were, "I thought I had a chance." She struggled to keep her voice steady, finally bowing her head slightly in a soft voice. "Why are you avoiding every chance we have to meet? Do I not even deserve an explanation?" I didn't reply, only turned to quietly face Stella, watching her mask her vulnerability bit by bit, her eyes filling with sadness once again. "Eric, do you like Maria that much?" Stella said it more as a statement than a question. "Or did you find out about me and Nolan, and now you're disgusted?" She stared at me intently, so I chuckled. We're all adults, Stella. We have the right to choose. Let's not dwell on it. Let's part on good terms. Did you ever love me? Stella's tears started to fall as she asked. I looked on, my heart aching, but I kept it hidden and coldly said, no. From the start, I was just using you to heal my wounds. Plus, in this crazy world, what's fake can seem real and what's real can seem fake. So don't show that face. No one is indispensable, and the earth keeps spinning no matter what. The pain deep in my heart flares up again. I hope Stella leaves soon, because I don't want to hurt her with my words anymore. Every word I speak feels like a sharp knife stabbing back at me. Stella shakes her head desperately, too sad to even speak. Even though it's a warm summer night, I see her still trembling. Finally, she silently pulls a small cloth bag out of her pocket and carefully hands it to me. She says, "You said I could use this to make a wish." I look at what she's offering. It's a piece of crystal clear amber, with a cicada locked inside, resting quietly, for who knows how long. At a company retreat, we went to a forest, and I stumbled upon this amber with a cicada. When Stella came to celebrate Chinese New Year with me, I gave the amber to her after dinner. I told her, in a way, this amber is a prison for the cicada. But since the cicada only lives above ground for about 80 days, it could be viewed as a form of rebirth. Stella, I'm giving this to you now, and someday you can use it to ask me for a wish. Back then, I knew if Maria was the prison in my past, I hoped meeting Stella would give me a sense of rebirth. So I gave her that amber. But reality is harsh. Mountains and seas separate us, and we just can't be together. They say when you love someone, you want them to become better. Leaving me, David can get treatment, and Stella can keep moving forward. But Stella doesn't know my thoughts at this moment. So, with her hands trembling, she quickly speaks before I can say anything. I only have one wish. Let's not break up. You can't leave me. Eric, don't be so cruel. Don't abandon me when I love you the most. Stella's voice chokes on that last sentence, as if it took all her strength. Her chest heaves, eyes red, almost breaking down as she pleads, begging me, please. My heart clenches tight, almost giving in. But reason ultimately keeps me in control. So, I look silently down at the amber in Stella's hands. I pick it up. I see the light of hope rekindle in her eyes. But Stella, I sigh, it was just a lie. Besides, now that Maria's returned, how could I leave her for you? I throw the amber into the water. I see Stella go crazy trying to retrieve it. My hands clench so tight. But despite the pain, I turn and leave without hesitation. Better to cut all ties than let her hold onto possible false hope between us. The next day, Stella left the country. I watched from a distance at the airport as her plane took off, whispered softly to it, "Stella, may you grow better and better." Turning around, I saw Maria, who had somehow followed me. "You clearly don't want Stella to leave, so why did you do it?" I didn't look at her. I just looked at where the plane disappeared. She deserves better. I can't be the one holding her back. Maria's expression momentarily shifts. Then, I hear her voice. "Eric, you really are such a good person." She quietly watches me, a slight, almost hopeful look in her eyes. I smile a bit, but don't even bother to play along with her words. Thinking of something, I finally glance at her and ask, "For years ago, you gave Ken 200,000, right?" Maria's eyes flash with surprise, pausing before she finally says, "You knew?" Though I'd already figured it was Maria who gave him the money, hearing it straight from her stirred up some mixed emotions. I pull out a card from my bag and hand it to her. "There's 300 thou in this card, no password needed. 200 thou for what I owe you, and 10,000 as 10 years interest. Thanks. I was grateful when I found out." Maria quickly waves her hands. "No need, you should just..." I cut her off. Debts should always be repaid. As for gratitude, if you ever need help, I'll do my best, I say as I push the card into Maria's hands. Maria, unsure of what to do, holds the card and says in a hoarse voice, "Eric, we..." I interrupt her again. "There's no way. There never was." I repeat, "May you find someone good soon." I watched the light in Maria's eyes dim bit by bit. Did you drive here? Asked. Maria nods, surrounded by a heavy atmosphere. I'm heading back. You should go home early too. As I head for the parking lot, I miss seeing Maria standing there mumbling to my back. Eric, this time I will win you back. She looks at the card in her hand and says toward where the plane vanished. Stella, your time with Eric is over. Even if you gave him that 200,000, he'll probably never find out. Without Stella, I had a lot more time to myself. I started working overtime at the office and hit the gym regularly. At work, I overheard a new colleague say how he wanted to join the city design competition but wasn't qualified yet, which bummed him out. Seeing my interest, he mentioned, Director Gu, you seem to have a knack for design. I laughed and replied, honestly, I'm pretty into design. He leaned in a bit and said, then you should join the design competition. Before I could respond, he added, if I had your talent and skills, I'd have started my own design company instead of working the 9 to 5 for someone else. Every man needs a dream of being his own boss someday. His words made me feel a bit ashamed. This young guy, fresh out of school, is already pushing to improve himself. Meanwhile, I've been floating aimlessly in the same place for years. I used to think that doing a good job was all it took to get recognized. But after working tirelessly for so many years, I still haven't been promoted. I'm just spinning my wheels. Back when I graduated, I confidently told Maria I would open my own design firm and make it famous in City A. But over the years, I've forgotten that initial dream. I suddenly remembered when Stella first came to my place. She saw the design of my room and the pieces on my wine rack and said that if I opened a design company, it would definitely take off. The drive and ambition of this new guy at work inspired me. I figured it's time I start making some changes too. But I knew that opening my own company wasn't an option just yet. First, I needed to enter the City A design competition and get selected. With a plan forming, I started browsing the internet for information on the City A design competition. This year's theme is Eye of City A. Unlike past competitions, this one coincides with the city's 100th anniversary celebration. Recently, City A has seen rapid growth in tourism and business, so the government decided the theme should focus on iconic city architecture. City A has a rich industrial history. Finding the perfect building to represent it will need some serious thought. After work, I threw together a quick dinner and dived into my study. I was deeply engrossed in reading about the developments in City A over the past decade. By the time an idea struck me, it was already past midnight. I hurried out of the shower, barely caring about the shampoo still in my hair, grabbed a towel, and rushed back to my study. By the time I jotted down all my ideas, the dawn was already breaking, and the shampoo had dried in my hair. After a quick shower, I called Jason. I remembered hearing him mention that some design students from City A University were looking for work. Competing in the design competition is like entering a job fair. The winner gets funded by the government to build. But I couldn't do it alone within the required time frame. I needed a team, and since Jason is a professor at City A University, I wanted his students to help me out. Winning such a prestigious competition would look great on their resumes. Jason is efficient. He got everything sorted out by the morning. I had a clear idea. Whether we win this competition or not, I want to start my own design company. So, I resigned from my job to focus on preparations. I rented a place across from City A University as a temporary workspace. After spending my savings on some equipment, Jason, his students, and I got down to work on our project. These college students are full of energy and get things done without any fuss. After a week of hard work, our project was finally complete. It was time for the City A design competition bidding event. Arriving at the venue, I noticed we were the only independent designers among well-known design firms in City A. But these students were undaunted. Their faces beamed with confidence. I felt encouraged too. Regardless of the outcome, we gave it our best shot. Plus, the government relaxed the conditions this year. The winner's project will be funded by the government to build. After the bid, the top 3 designs will be displayed at the City A Miracle Museum for a week. So, even if winning is a long shot, we aimed for the top 3. Everyone walked the red carpet into the hall, sat at the pre-assigned seats, and waited for the government officials in charge of voting to introduce themselves. The mayor of City A then delivered a lengthy speech. Half an hour later, team representatives drew numbers to decide the order of presentations. We got number 10. The project showcases were impressive, each one done with care and thought. The standout was the Sunrise Group. They're a hot design firm in City A, even going public within 2 years. They've captured major City A building designs and are even recognized internationally. A formidable competitor. On stage, their team leader was presenting their design. A 3D model played on screen, highlighting the details. Then came the explanation. To surpass and add a new landmark to City A, we've chosen the newest DC steel. It's incredibly strong, rust-free, and deformation-proof, boasting a futuristic look. They presented a Model 2, clearer and more real, of their Eye of City A Ferris wheel, overshadowing all other structures. Built on City A's hills, it would offer panoramic views of the entire city and even across to another city. Its sheer size, seating 30 or more per cabin, promised a shot at becoming the tallest Ferris wheel, leading even more to strive for the national and internationally recognized title. I have to say, their team's really strong. It was soon my turn to get on stage and give an introduction. Hello, everyone. Hello, colleagues. It's an honor to participate in the Eye of City A bidding event held by the government. Now, I'll have my team show you the 3D model. I nodded to the 2 people who went on stage with me. The assistant pressed a remote, and my design popped up on the big screen. Black and white colors. Is it a round ball? Inside, scenes from City A appeared. What's going on? People seemed confused. I smiled and said, I know a lot of you don't get it. Some might think it's a hot air balloon painted with City A's skyline, doing a daily loop around the city, raising different flags at different spots. Some might think it's a quirky building placed atop a tall building or a mountain or a tower. Even some might think it's a huge ship, floating on our river, blooming beautifully. You can even have performances that mimic the famous folk song Lake in another city. I won't drag on. This isn't a hot air balloon or a building. It doesn't even have a physical form. No need to spend 1 or 2 years building it. You don't even need investors. Just the government is enough to keep it lasting forever, getting better and more spectacular as modern technology advances. So what is it? The mayor couldn't help but ask. I gave my assistant a look, and he pressed the remote. The black and white screen quickly filled with various colors. Everyone saw City A's buildings, the river, and the bustling traffic. But where's the round ball? Someone chuckled and pointed with a laser pointer at the center of the city. The assistant pressed the remote, and there it was, a round, transparent ball appeared right in the city center. A bit like something out of a fantasy movie. Then, everything within the transparent ball started appearing. Buildings, snacks, trinkets, schools, all the details of City A. First from 30 years ago, then 20, then 10, and finally now. Everyone was nostalgic about City A's rapid development, childhood memories flooding back. It's like a massive player, or maybe something out of a sci-fi movie. It's hard to describe. The assistant came up to explain. This is quite simple. It's a 3D holographic projection that's been trendy in recent years. We'll set up instruments at specific points, making images gather above the city center like a mirage for everyone to see our city's glory. But isn't this usually done indoors? Asked a puzzled government official. The assistant smiled. Nowadays, what technology can do doesn't seem like much from a future perspective. But for now, it's a lot. This issue's been resolved for a while, although it's rarely used outdoors in a permanent way. No point in over-explaining. You'll probably still find it confusing. Why not look at the model? Little Wong pointed at a big box nearby. Everyone looked on eagerly as 3 young folks pushed the box to the stage center and opened the lid with me. The model of City A came into view. My team and I exchanged smiles and activated switches installed in various places. In no time, people saw countless points of light appearing within the City A model, almost like pieces coming together. They quickly formed a ball, revealing scenery from City A, every detail. I watched everyone's rapt attention, my smile widening, pulling out more props from underneath, saying, "First, the ultra-bright light. Turned on a flashlight. The ball didn't disappear under the glaring light. Next, rain. Pulled out a yard sprinkler. No effect on the image with low water flow. Barely affected even when more intense. Then high winds. Turned on a fan as big as a human head. After all sorts of tests, everyone was convinced. Unlike big Ferris wheels or towering buildings, this was more unique and creatively fun. Plus, as tech advances, the images'll get sharper. Imagine sending alerts and stuff, no more checking phones. Just look up. And not many other places or countries seem to do this, right? Our country's leading the way here. The government folks chatted amongst themselves, very pleased. Especially since I made it clear it wouldn't cost much. But couldn't we make some money from it? Questions started coming up. I answered, everyone's familiar with City A. In these times, there's so little love around. We plan to host a radio event encouraging people to express themselves to parents, partners, to City A, to the world. Even if it doesn't change others, City A will definitely become more harmonious as we move toward a shared future. The questions kept coming, but I was ready. No matter what they asked, I responded smoothly, reassuring the government side. They all gave high scores. As expected, we won the bid. Afterward, the president of Sunrise Group met with me personally. He said he admired my talent and invited me to be the vice president of his company. I politely declined and shared my desire to start my own design company. He was very supportive and offered a $3 million investment to help me start up. With his help, I finally had the funds to launch a design company. But before that, I needed to work with the government to finish the Eye of City A project. Construction began and I was on site every day. I just grab a quick bite of a bun during meal times. One day, Maria showed up at the construction site with a lunchbox. Seeing me standing there, she smiled and said, "No matter what, we're still friends, right? As a friend bringing you lunch, you won't say no, right?" I scratched my head and smiled at her. After that, Maria would occasionally bring me meals. Whenever I got a rare break, she'd show up at my house with a bunch of fruits and my favorite foods. After I refused her twice, she stopped coming in person. I love this hot rice soup from a place on Jinkai Road. It's rich and tasty. But it's too far away for delivery, and now I'm busy at the construction site, so I can't often go. But lately, whenever I come back from the site, there's always a packed hot rice waiting for me at the security room. I know Maria buys it. After all, only she and Stella know about my preferences. Even though she frames everything as a friendly gesture, it still feels a bit weird. Eventually, I just moved to the site. 6 months later, the project was completed. The Eye of City A I designed received a lot of praise from the locals and even gained international attention. For a while, I was famous, getting praise all over news sections and headlines. I took advantage of this momentum and swiftly opened my own company. I invited the CEO of Sunrise Group to join me for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. With my impressive work and his extensive promotion efforts, my business wasn't lacking customers. Over the past year, my company became like my second home as I dedicated myself and my team to our designs. Maria occasionally stopped by to offer help. It was hard to refuse, so her visits became more frequent. Later, I noticed my assistant was always around her. And with him, Maria seemed to smile a lot more. Plus, Maria started bringing me not just my meal but an extra one too. One day, she brought another extra meal. I quietly followed her and saw her heading to the rooftop with it. Hiding in the corner, I saw my assistant was waiting there. Raising an eyebrow, I thought they did a good job keeping it secret. But then again, it might be good that Maria's moving on and starting a new chapter. "Maria, you've been bringing me food so many times, what's your deal? You don't say a word. Don't you know I won't be able to sleep tonight?" The assistant's voice snapped me back to reality. Did I just witness a confession? Maria seemed stunned and said, "I need to think it over before I give you an answer." I smirked. Maria can be quite stubborn when it comes to feelings. The assistant suddenly looked hopeful. "So, it's not like you don't have feelings for me?" The assistant grinned and impulsively gave Maria a peck on the face. "All right, take your time and think it through." Maria used a tissue to wipe her face, giving the assistant a somewhat annoyed shove. But I noticed her lips curled in a smile. getting a face full of romance. It felt like I didn't need lunch anymore. But honestly, I do hope Maria's future gets brighter and better. Thinking about all this, Stella's smile flashed through my mind. I haven't forgotten her all this time. Looking up at the sky, I softly whispered, Stella, you need to be happy too. When you're busy, time flies. A year later, I'd grown tremendously and opened 3 branches in City A and even partnered with big brands abroad. My company met the standards to go public and did so successfully. On the day we went public, Nolan reached out to me. I hadn't seen Nolan in over 2 years. He had lost a lot of weight, looked sickly pale, and wasn't in good shape. During our talk, I found out he was sick. End-stage kidney failure. Maybe near-death words are often kind. He told me, Eric, back then I broke you and Stella up, but now I'm dying. I can't and won't stop you anymore. You should go find her. I looked at him and let out a cold laugh. There's no need, it's long over between us. After over 2 years, she might have moved on. Since I made that decision back then, I shouldn't disrupt her life now. Nolan wanted to say more, but I interrupted. When you love someone, as long as they're doing better, that's enough. Nolan took a long breath. I really want to apologize. I messed up, and I know you won't forgive me. It's just my destiny with Stella was never meant to be. You were my life's benefactor. Without you, there might not be my today. Let that be the past. Neither of us should dwell on it. After Nolan left, I stayed put, staring blankly at the sky. Stella, what are you doing now? Don't be mad at me for too long, you must be happy. As I was about to head back to the company, Maria walked up to me. Eric, you should go find Stella. I chuckled, what's with you all? Don't speak, just listen. Maria cut me off. Actually, 4 years ago, the $200K we gave Ken wasn't from me, it was from Stella. She just used my name. She sold 2 family heirloom jade bracelets from her mom to get the money together when I told her Ken kept bothering you. She never told you, and she thought I didn't know. So I tricked my cousin and tricked you. That's why you must go find her. I stood there, stunned. Took a while to react. Why are you telling me this? Maria looked calmly at me, and after a while, tears filled her eyes. I can't keep making mistakes. She handed me a plane ticket. Go find her. I'll watch over the company for you. I looked at her, took the ticket. As I turned to leave, something crossed my mind. I turned back and said, you and the assistant stay happy forever. Maria raised an eyebrow, surprised for a moment, then smiled and replied, thanks. I hope you find happiness too.